sorry?
We need more of these.
You need one? Oh, wow, I didn't realize, I only printed 20 because usually we don't have that many people. You can have that one. Okay.
All right. We'll call the July 1st, 2020 City Council meeting to order. We're going to have Commissioner Smith do the prayer and the pledge and the fact of the day for us.
Let us pray. Our God, our Father, we come once again to say thank you for allowing us in the wholeness here rainy day. Thank you, my Father, for this opportunity to come and take up the business of the city for the residents of the city of Apopka. We ask your continued prayer to continue guidance upon our mayor as he continues to fulfill the vision you've already purposed in his heart, as he continues to lead our city on the higher life. Bless, O God, the commissioners that support, Heavenly Father, the agenda that we have before us this day, that we may be able to do those things that will be of benefit to all the citizens of the city of Apopka. We ask you to lead, guide, and direct our paths. In God's son Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On July 4th, 1776, Continental Congress adopts the Declaration of Independence. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Continental Congress adopts the Declaration of Independence, which proclaims the independence of the United States of America from Great Britain and its king. The Declaration came 442 days after the first volleys of the American Revolution were fired at Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. The Revolutionary War would last for 5 more years, with the final victory being at Yorktown in 1781. In 1783, with the signing of the Treaty of Paris with Britain, the United States formally became a free and independent nation. Back to the day.
Thank you. Okay. Minutes, everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? Motion, need a motion? to approve the
Motion.
minutes? Got a motion by Commissioner Nolan,
Second.
second by Commissioner Becker. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Edward, any changes to the agenda?
One minor change, Mayor. Under my report, I have the financial report update for this month, and I want to move that to under presentations, after the third item in presentations, since we're going to be talking about the audit and the reserves. We feel that it's appropriate to put the financial update right after that as well. That's the only change.
Thank you, Edward. Okay, first up, Apopka Youth Council, Dr. Jackson.
Okay, so since the Apopka Youth
Why
Council
don't you
began...
give us your
meeting-
name and address for the record, please?
Sorry. My name is John Rassel. I'm here with the Apopka Youth Council. So since the Apopka Youth Council began meeting, we set out a goal to try and focus on the importance of sustainability and really just improving community outreach.
You'll need to speak in the mic so everybody can hear you.
Okay. So since the Apopka Youth Council began meeting, we set out a goal to try and focus on the importance of sustainability and really just improving community outreach as a whole. Through this, we've done various things such as the Adopt a Road program down on 5th Street, and recently we've begun our plan to install Florida-friendly landscaping at the Billy Dean Community Center. Additionally, we've done things such as meeting the fire department and the Public Works Department, which has really given us insight into what these departments do and spreading our message of the Youth Council to others throughout the community. So the Youth Council, for me personally, has really just been a great experience to become more involved in the community and leave a positive impact on those around us. And a part of our goal has been to put together a recycling video to inform residents on the proper recycling habits and the consequences that improper recycling has on our community. So we hope you enjoy, and thank you. During 2020, the Apopka Youth Council will improve community knowledge on sustainability by educating residents on how to properly recycle.
In 2019, out of 2,325 tons of garbage that was recycled, 97% of it was rejected.
Hello, my name is Tariq Ballard, and I'm part of the Apopka Youth Council, and we're here today to ask Mr. Josh Robinson some questions about recycling. Mr. Robinson, what do you do for Apopka?
I'm the operations manager for the city solid waste division.
What are some items that you find that people recycle that they should not recycle?
One of the biggest problems we have with recycling in the city now are people trying to recycle bags, plastic bags, either loose or by putting recyclables in the plastic bags, which makes it impossible to recycle that material as well. So, yeah, definitely no bags in the recycling.
And what advice can you give to the residents of Apopka about what they should and should not recycle?
What we're telling people now is to, if in doubt, throw it out. Contamination in recycling is one of the biggest problems we're experiencing here in Apopka and in Orange County. And people, well-meaning to recycle all they can, often put things that aren't recyclable in our program. Even things that may have the recycling symbol on them may not always be part of that program. So rather than look at the symbols, we're just asking people to think about bottles, jars, cans, paper, and cardboard. You know, just those items. And if you're unsure, just leave it out. It'd be better to throw away something that was recyclable than put something in that wasn't. And then that can contaminate the whole load, and we lose that whole load. So.
By contract, if 15% of the material in the load is not recyclable, the whole load is rejected.
Did you know that once pizza boxes are soiled, they are no longer recyclable?
If a load has any hazardous material such as petroleum products or gas cans, the whole load is rejected.
Say no to plastic bags. Do not put your recyclables in the plastic bag.
When in doubt, throw it out.
So if there are any questions about the recycling video, the recycling program, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
Is there any way that we can get a copy of that to be able to put out on Facebook and different ways?
So yes, we plan on distributing the video to get as far reach as possible on Facebook, the city website, any way possible. You can talk to Dr. Jackson. But we really want everyone in the community to know the proper habits of recycling, and as you saw, they can have very severe consequences.
And if we can get that, of course, to the schools as well as they begin to meet,
Yep.
or whatever way they're allowed to meet.
Exactly.
And get that information to our young people by a generation, we can really get a real change. Thanks, great work.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Miller, anything?
He covered it.
Yes, Mr. Smith?
Well, the only thing that I could think of could further encourage our citizens to recycle, if we could have some kind of a label that we can place on the trash cans that might be.
I think we've got, there should be labels on there now, but
I don't think so.
they're on the top of the can.
On the top of the can.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, it's, because what happens, I mean, I wish Josh were here, but one of the things that we find out is that it costs us more if we take the load to recycling and it gets rejected, then we now have to double pay for that. I mean, we're almost doubling the cost for us to get rid of that trash than if we'd have just had it in the trash to begin with.
Yes, and I think the biggest misconception is a lot of individuals place those plastic containers in a plastic trash bag.
Now, one of the things we've been running for several months, no, almost 6 months now, is we're at Apopka Elementary, we're recycling the Publix plastic bags. So you can take those to Apopka Elementary, and they're recycling with us. We're partnering with Waste Management to do that. So, yeah, the plastic bag, what happens, they gum up the teeth that grinds all the stuff up, and it's not a good thing. Yeah. Commissioner Becker?
Nothing. Great job.
All right,
Yeah,
thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Next up, Jamie, and I guess Joel. Where did I see? Oh, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jamie Roberson, Finance Director, City of Apopka. I have here with me with MSL CPA and Advisors, Joel Knopp. He's going to present to you the required auditor communications for fiscal year end September 30th, 2019.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. It is a pleasure to be here and present the audit for the year ended September 30, 2019. It's always good to be at this stage of the audit, so do have a couple topics to cover, including some required communications under our professional standards. Those are actually laid out in a separate letter as part of your package there, but just to highlight a few items there, one being our responsibilities as auditors for the city are to audit in accordance with our professional standards as well as government audit standards, as well as uniform guidance and the Florida Auditor General rules. So there's a lot of standards that oversee the services we're providing to the city and the things that we're looking at. Management's responsibilities include taking responsibility for the financial statements themselves. Also, the internal controls over financial reporting are management's responsibilities, and we as the auditors review those, but we can't be considered part of the city's internal controls. We report on internal controls and compliance, and at the completion of our audit, we obtain representations from management that they've provided us all the information that we requested, and that they're taking responsibility for the information. Jamie was as Finance Director, was the assigned individual for oversight of our services, and I'm pleased to report that we got full cooperation from the city staff as we did our audit procedures. As it relates to the objective of our audit, we issued several reports, which you'll find in the comprehensive annual financial report. The first being the independent auditor's report, where you'll find our opinion on the financial statements. And that was an unmodified opinion, which means the financial statements are fairly stated and presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for governments. And then in the back section of the document, you'll find 4 additional reports related primarily to compliance. The first one being the report on internal controls over financial reporting and compliance in accordance with government audit standards. We did have several findings included in that report, which I'll cover in the next couple slides. The single audit report was the next report, which covers the major grants that we tested for the city. And I'm pleased to report there were no findings as it relates to the grant testing. The independent accountant's report and the management letter are both reports required by the Florida Auditor General. The accountant's report has to do with the city's compliance with its investment policy, and that was also a clean report. And then the management letter covers a variety of Florida statute required items that we as auditors have to report on. We did have a couple management letter observations, which I'll also cover on the subsequent slides. So first off, to just run through the findings, as I mentioned in our government audit standards report. As you see on this page, based on the numbering of these findings, 2017 and 2018 as the index numbers, these were all related to prior year findings. And if you look over to the right, you'll see that the majority of these findings were repeat findings. And just to give some context on that, in the prior year audits, and specifically in 2018, we were performing our audit procedures in the later part of, or I guess it was the second to third quarter of 2018 audit. And so as a result, those findings that we identified in the prior audit could not be retroactively corrected to the beginning of fiscal year 19. So we did identify and review these findings to see if corrective action had been taken. We did see significant action taken by the city to address these findings, but unfortunately they couldn't be made retroactive to the first half of the year. So that's why the majority of these are repeated. In the event that things progress as they are right now and what we identified in the 2019 audit, we expect that the majority of these findings will no longer be repeated and they can be removed in the fiscal year 20 audit. The one finding, the first one, 2017-002, related to fixed asset reconciliation, specifically in a subledger with detailed fixed asset listings. That one is probably the one finding that we do expect will repeat, just because it requires some additional resources by the city to address, and it's not something that can be easily fixed with a change in procedure. The second slide here covers management letter observations that we had in the prior year. You'll see that one was resolved, one continued, again related to the first half of the year as it relates to accounts payable reconciliation. We also saw out of the 17 funds, I believe, that the city had reconciliations with in the prior year, or reconciliation issues in the prior year. Only one remained as a repeat finding. So again, a significant improvement noted. Even though the findings repeated, the city obviously made great efforts in resolving these. And then we had two current year observations in the management letter, one related to retainage payable reconciliation on the wastewater treatment plant project, and a second on improving documentation related to the FEMA grant. These were not considered significant issues, but we did have recommendations related to them. And for all these findings, Jamie and Edward have provided a detailed response at the back of the document to outline in great detail what the city's corrective actions are and their plan to address. All right, and then just move into a couple of financial highlight slides here. This is a focus on the general fund, as it's the primary operating fund for the city. I would highlight this as of September 30, 2019, so it is looking back a ways, but as of that date, the unassigned fund balance for the city general fund was $12.4 million, which represented 25% of total expenditures and transfers out, and that was an improvement from the prior year, and also what we would consider, as we audit many different municipalities across the state, a very healthy unassigned fund balance, especially considering what the city's facing with the COVID-19 impact. So it was a net change in fund balance of a positive $2.6 million for the general fund, and that's broken out from a budgetary comparison standpoint. You'll see that the city received $2.5 million more in revenues than budgeted and projected in fiscal year 19, and then spent $3.1 million less than they had budgeted. So it was an overall positive budget variance of $5.6 million. So whereas the city had budgeted to spend down fund balance by $3 million, you actually increased it by $2.6 million. So again, very positive results. As it relates to these past two slides here, they focus on the general fund, which is reported on more of a short-term focus. I do want to highlight that there are statements in the financial statements that paint a picture of the long-term picture of the city's finances, including the long-term liabilities for net pension liability and other post-employment benefits. Those did increase during fiscal year 19 rather significantly, and just to keep in mind, the liabilities for both of those categories are derived from looking at the city's investments in those plans versus the actuarially accrued liability. So as the investments decline, which we can definitely foresee that being a possibility with the current economic climate, that obviously has a negative impact on the city's liability, and those liabilities could increase. Along with that, that could mean a funding increase for the city as well. So those are just things to keep in mind as we look ahead to the future. I'll let Jamie and Edward address that issue, but from an audit standpoint, as of September 30, 2019, things were looking pretty good. This last slide just covers the major enterprise funds for the city. Again, positive operating results for both utility system and sanitation, as well as positive cash flows from operations. So from both the enterprise and governmental funds standpoint, things were in good shape for the city as of September 30, 2019. And with that, I'll be glad to entertain any questions you may have if they pertain to the audit specifically.
Any questions? Any questions? Any questions?
No, I mean, we had a chance to talk on Monday just to go through the findings, so pretty clear.
Okay.
Thank you. Awesome. Just on the CAFR itself, just when we look at the statistical sections, let's just make sure that all this stuff is buttoned up. So like if we look at streetlights, for example, we've got a number of streetlights in there, but then in 2019 it says that we have 4,000 of them, or acreage for Parks and Rec space. I don't think this reflects our Hickerson property that we got. It's not reflected in the statistical section, so just let's make sure that that's up to date.
We did update the streetlights. Vlad actually assisted us with the streetlights. That number last year in 2018, there was only like 134 in there. I personally don't know how they came up with that number before, but they actually we recently did a streetlights project, and they actually went out and worked with Duke and counted streetlights in public services to help us derive at that number. That's why that number is significantly different. We do ask the departments to provide that data back to us, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, outliers like that, we should probably have like a notation, because we may have gone from counting just streetlights on kind of the major arterial roads versus neighborhood streetlights, things like that. So.
And that's another function that we're doing in finance. We're trying to document a little bit better, as you've heard me say over the last 2 years since I've been here. Documentation was one of the things that we're lacking. So we're trying to map and create documents so that if someone else comes in behind us, they can figure out what we actually did and how we derived at those numbers. Any questions for Joel before I proceed with my presentation with the responses?
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jamie Roberson, Finance Director. So I'm actually going to give a presentation to you guys in response to the management letter comments that is outlined in your document in the actual letter as a presentation today. So this is our Finance Department's management responses to auditors' observations, weaknesses, and deficiencies. I do want to keep in mind and want to reiterate that, as Joel stated, we were concurrently making implementation improvements as we were going through the 2018 audit, which truly was in the spring and early summer last year. If you recall, we issued our actual CAFR on July 31st last year. So with that being said, I hope there's understanding that that is the primary reason that a lot of the repeated findings were not able to be resolved, because they were truly present at the beginning of the fiscal year, and we're looking at a point in time. So in one of the comments that the auditors made, they stated that they could see significant improvements compared to the beginning of 2019 towards the end of 2019 for many of the items that they found. One of the primary reasons for the audit findings was a backlog of work accompanied by several accounting errors. And a secondary reason is we're still actually doing data cleanup with the system. Over the last year and going through the audit process, we were allowed to truly understand how our accounting software works as we were researching items. And we're still today cleaning things up as we come across them. So those are the primary reasons that we're working with for the findings. So to address the accounts payable detail reconciliation that is in your document, the corrective action that the finance team or the finance department has taken is we were able to reconcile all but one of the funds that had an accounts payable detail balance discrepancy. This was the utility systems fund, and it was traditionally related to the wastewater treatment plant, the $65 million project that was started in 2016 that we constructed through public services. There are approximately 50 vendors. We have a primary contractor and a ton of owner direct purchasing contractors. And there were some inconsistencies that were related to accounts payable and retainage payable. There was a programming change that was done on October 9th, 2017 that resulted in a change in the background of where disbursements would actually occur. So they changed it so it would post to retainage payable instead of an accounts payable line item, and it created discrepancies between those two account lines. However, there was also discrepancies or inconsistencies associated with the way they were actually recording retainage payable in the system that caused them. So after researching, we noted that there were programming changes, and we attempted to resolve them on December 31st, 2020, when the primary contractor was paid in full, which is Garney and Company. We paid them in full with retainage, but as you'll see on a later comment, that retainage payable wasn't accurately recorded as of 9/30/2019, and it's related to all those inconsistencies across vendors. So our hope is at the next city council meeting, we're bringing before you a closeout of the wastewater treatment project, so we can close out the loan and we can close out all open POs so that we can fully identify the discrepancy between accounts payable and retainage payable, and we make one last audit adjustment. But until we could actually close out the entire project and all vendors associated with it, it become very difficult to fully identify because there's so many things related to it. The next comment is directly related to the previous comment we discussed. Now, this is a new year observation. However, again, once we go forward with closing out the project, we will make one last adjustment, identifying, hopefully we're able to fully identify, but there could be a possibility of a potential adjustment. This project has been a bear in itself, and we've learned a lot. And you'll see at the end of the presentation some opportunities and challenges that we're facing because we implemented changes for project tracking, especially for major projects like utility projects that are large dollar value projects. The next finding is related to the 2017 Hurricane Irma grant that occurred. Most of these expenditures, when they went through the single audit, were incurred either at the end of fiscal year 2017 or the beginning of fiscal year 2018. And obviously, I wasn't here then. And what they found was some inconsistencies in the grant documentation for generator usages. Sometimes generator usage was documented well, and sometimes it wasn't. The specific finding is a result of generator usage was a large reimbursement for FEMA, over, I think it was closer to $200,000. And due to those inconsistencies, FEMA actually accepted a letter from Duke Energy to close out their side of it that said that the city was without power during this period of time. So the FEMA coordinator and I, which is Chief Sean Wylam, have committed to properly documenting and stressing to the staff in the event that we have a hurricane or any other grant-related document, we need to basically over-document. Personnel is typically a large proponent of reimbursement, but labor and materials need to be documented thoroughly as well, because when you go through a hurricane, there's different labor and material rates for the equipment you use, and it should be properly documented, and it should remain consistent from one area to the next. So we're committed to doing that. Again, the fixed assets comment is the one comment that I believe will also be repeated. We did implement a process to ensure that fixed assets and CIP projects are tracked and reconciled. We're using project tracking within Edmonds now. We're also doing this for grants. We're assigning a project ID to every project or every grant so that we can properly track and run reports on them. During the 2020 budget process, if you guys recall, I did ask for a position for fixed assets. Unfortunately, that position was not available to me in the current year budget. I have requested that same position again in the 2021 budget. However, due to the impact of COVID-19 and the associated budget constraints, the likelihood I realize is probably not likely, but I wanted to be transparent and make you guys aware that this finding may potentially be repeated. We did make significant improvements over the process of reconciling fixed assets. We're reconciling at a classification level and not at a detail level, and that process was much smoother than it was last year. Utility billing. This finding is related to the reconciliation of the utility billing subsidiary ledger to the finance side general ledgers. This process, if you recall, had not been completed since the IMS conversion to Edmonds. Last year in June of 2019, Jasmine and I did attend training for Edmonds, and there is a process that should be done on a regular basis. Unfortunately, due to the deficiencies that I had to address on the finance side of my department or the finance side of the house, I've not been able to invest a lot of time into the utility billing side. However, we recently had someone retire from the utility billing side, and I requested permission from Edward and Mayor to reclassify that customer service position to a professional level position for a utility billing accountant. And if you recall, on the June 3rd meeting, Tremaine presented to you the Census Utility Billing Consumption Portal. She is my professional level accountant, and she is doing an evaluation process of the entire reconciliation process from the subsidiary ledger on the utility billing side to the general ledger on the finance side to help identify items that we need to correct. A part of this comment this year was the fact that we did not have an adjustment for uncollectible accounts. Uncollectible accounts have not been pursued by the city since basically the IMS conversion. So we currently have a contract that has been reviewed, and we're going to present for piggyback with a third-party collection company. And once we develop a program, we have training with Edmonds, because honestly, we don't even know how to do a collection process inside of Edmonds. We have training on July 14th and 15th of this month with Tremaine to implement a collection process and use a third-party collector. Internal controls over financial accounting. Most of these items have been corrected throughout the 2019 fiscal year. We made significant improvements over internal controls. These are items such as ensuring that we have proper authorization on invoices, proper review of transactions. The person entering the transaction is not the person posting the transaction. And policy updates. As you can imagine, I had promised you that we were going to do policy updates, but due to the staffing limitations and just trying to focus on daily work, it's not been our as easy as we had hoped. But we're currently with the independent contractor and the purchasing administrator, because one of the comments was related to the purchasing card. We are in the process of drafting a purchasing policy update, which will include threshold increases. For example, the legislature increased the fixed assets threshold just recently in the last session, effective today, from $1,000 to $5,000. So that'll be a threshold we need to address in the policy update. In addition, we would like to add a purchasing card policy to the purchasing policy, and various improvements that have been discussed by staff and the leadership team to make improvements to the purchasing process. So we were hoping to implement that by October 1st so that we can start the new year fresh. Bank reconciliations. Again, this comment is repeated. We were able to identify a bank reconciliation process, but again, it was being done simultaneously as we were going through the audit process, which created a backlog for 2019. So to say that the bank reconciliations were done timely is obviously, we can't say that. So I also lost my bank reconciliation chief accountant to leave. She had a new baby and she was out on maternity leave, and she actually came back early to assist me with the audit. And since she has returned, I have not assigned her normal duties back out to her so that she can ensure that for 2020 that we are up to date and compliant with this bank reconciliation. So as she was my right-hand person also for the audit as the chief accountant, so she is instrumental in the audit process. So as soon as we get done with the audit and some other items that we have to do to close out fiscal year 2019, she will be focusing solely on bank reconciliations, and the other staff members have her daily duties assigned to them. And the audit adjustments that were noted in your communications document, the audit adjustments from last year were basically cleared. However, there were 2 new audit adjustments that management and the auditors agreed that didn't require an actual change in statement, was related to the retainage payable and the utility billing finding for uncollectible accounts. So as we proceed and progress, the finance team and I will continue evaluating and making necessary improvements as they're needed. So the audit is completed. Now where do we go? So I just want to make you guys aware, just because the CAFR is issued to you today doesn't mean that we're done with fiscal year 2019. There's still things that have to be done. We have to still file the annual financial report to the state of Florida. We have debt compliance for bonds and revenue notes that include bond compliance, anti-dilution, and CRA reporting. We have pension reports that have to be filed for 2019, and we have a transportation report that has to be filed for 2019. So just because I present to you today doesn't officially mean that I'm complete with 2019, and it's truly time to start 2020 again. So accounting challenges and opportunities. So one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in the finance department is staff size limits internal controls, efficiencies, and amount improvements that can be implemented. My staff wears many hats. I wear many hats. My procurement administrator, she's basically helping me with fixed assets. Her job for procurement is a full-time job, issuing bids, processing requisitions, and then filling any gaps with fixed assets and disposals and agenda review. My chief accountant works on both sides of the house. She works with UB a lot doing reconciliations and working on daily duties. She does pension stuff. So the staff wears many hats. My accountant, 2 position, he does pensions, he does transportation reporting, he does other reporting, he does debt management. So we're all wearing various hats. And many of the professional level positions, you won't see a huge increase in overtime for the finance department because half my staff or the majority of my staff is exempt. So even though we're putting in hours, additional hours beyond our 40-hour work week, you're not physically seeing it in the financial numbers. So I'm personally still working 6 to 7 days a week, and it's been 2 years. So there is a huge issue associated with the staffing levels within the finance department. We're still continuously identifying areas for admin's cleanup, and I would like to personally get back to one day being, instead of being reactive and trying to react to everything that's thrown our way, as to being more proactive. As I said earlier, we had a non-efficient way of tracking project expenses. This came into play really big when we were trying to do fixed assets and do the reconciliation when it comes to our projects that were construction in progress projects, because we don't put those assets on the books until they're completed, but there's a line item in there that is construction in progress. We had, in 2018, we were the blind leading the blind. We didn't even know how to go about it. But the difference in 2019, when we fully understood what the process was, and with the assistance of the procurement administrator knowing where their expenditures were going out, she's the one that identified CIP with public services and the grants. A lot of our grants are project related. So some opportunities that I would like to address is finance is always about setting priorities and goals and trying to focus on accomplishing them. And now we're setting up project tracking, and we're using the system with inside Edmunds to do project tracking with assigning project IDs for grants and expenditures. So your finance department's commitment is to continue leadership and guidance, and the staff is always committed to continually improving the city's financial stability and well-being. I want to tell you a little bit, 2 small successes that I shared with the commissioners during their individual reviews as it pertains to documentation. And these seem small, but they're huge. So when the auditors were reviewing capital outlay, one of the auditors came to me and said, Jamie, I don't understand why this $28,000 expense is not capital. It was a huge expense. I want to make sure, or I need to make sure that it was truly not a capital outlay and it wasn't misclassified. In previous years, documentation was limited and finance staff didn't do the greatest job of telling the story. I got the transaction, I went to the procurement administrator and I said, Jess, can you pull up the PO and see what information is on here? And the expenditure was related to a major utility repair that we had brought back to you guys at City Council. And it was a large expenditure because of the nature of the repair and the type of repair that it was, but all the documentation was attached to the purchase order in the PO, and I did not have to call the department to get the answer. I was able to provide the auditors the answer to their question literally in like 5 minutes. That seems like a minor success, but that was a huge success. Even just knowing what was going on was very transparent and a part of the success of the finance department. And another example that I gave was related to the Hurricane Irma expenditures. The reason why the 2017 hurricane was audited in 2019 as a major program is because the guidelines for auditing that type of grant is when the expenditure or the grant program is obligated. Though the event occurred in 2017, the obligation did not occur until 2019. So that's why it showed up on your single audit for 2019. Chief Wylam and I were working with the auditor, and we provided him a listing of obligated projects and the dates they were obligated. And when we were finalizing the CFA expenditures, there was a project excluded from there. And I asked the auditor, I said, why did you exclude the project from there? And he said, well, that says application on the spreadsheet that we obtained from the FEMA portal. It had a different explanation. I said, well, Alan, I know that FEMA has already paid us for that, and that is an alternates project, and we need to include that in the statement of expenditures for the single audit. That's another success, because knowing what is going on with revenues and grants is super important. I didn't have to go back and research because, fortunately or unfortunately for my part, I review every single cash receipt posting that comes through the city, with the exception of a few departments. So I know what is going on. I physically review every single disbursement check on the accounts payable side that leaves the city, with the exception of UB. The UB deposits and refunds are reviewed by Jasmine or Edgar. Edward reviews every single PO that gets submitted. So we have an awareness that previous administrations didn't, and those are huge successes on part of the finance department. I personally could not be prouder of the efficiencies and where we are today compared to where we were a year ago. So that concludes my presentation about the audit. Does anyone have any questions for me regarding that before we go into the general fund reserve presentation?
Mr. Bankson?
Yeah, having the lack, obviously we have to deal with this COVID recovery going into budget season. So having the lack of staffing, does that create more of a revenue loss? In other words, are there opportunities where we could be seeing more revenue that are lost simply because of having to backtrack and do double duty? Would having more staffing actually help us in a revenue positive way that can help offset that we're going to have to put more funds towards that?
Well, the bulk of my staff that is working additional hours are exempt, so there's no impact to the revenues or expenditures for that. I just don't know personally how long we can sustain what we're working at now. I know that I am struggling personally. I cannot continue to spend 6 or 7 days a week committed. My family's suffering. My health could be suffering. It's not sustainable. It's been 2 years. Thursday was my 2-year anniversary. It's truly not sustainable.
Okay, thanks.
And Edward is doing the budget too. Finance is not even doing the budget. So that is another issue in itself. Truly and honestly, the budget should be being done by the finance department so that Edward can focus on additional items that he could be managing as the city administrator. So there's not a direct correlation with revenue. It's more so on the expenditures, and because most of the staff is exempt and it's not impacting overtime, it's more of a off the financial statement area for impact.
I'm just looking at the pressure to get this done. Is this simply just that stack that we get to when we can, but it won't harm us if it's delayed? Obviously, I want to see everything buttoned down, done right. It helps us project future correctly. That's the difficult part on our side and yours as well. So we definitely see the benefit in doing that, but we don't want the staff overwhelmed. So we know if there's a shortage of staff, that's what I'm trying to find out. Does it harm us, or does it just simply delay what we'd really like to see accomplished? So that helps me to get that input.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Having been in the classroom, I understand all the extra hours you're putting in, and I don't feel it's fair to you nor your staff. But my question is, we know you need help. Is there professional temporary services that we may be able to utilize that might alleviate some of your overtime?
For example, as most of you know, I am the president currently. I became the president of the FGFOA on the 19th, and the FGFOA does have a finance professional retiree network that you can pool resources, but there's a cost associated with that. You have to negotiate a contract with those people and pay them. So Mount Dora is currently using a gentleman by the name of Tom Klinker, who was actually my mentor and is really the person that allowed me to gain the knowledge that I have today to be where I am today. And he has been at Mount Dora for 2 years as a consultant. So helping them with their challenges that they've been facing. So there are resources available, but it takes resources to get resources.
But I guess my point was, but if we were able to find a couple of dollars someplace, it would be cheaper in the short term to do it that way as opposed to hiring someone full-time?
I think the fixed assets, if you're speaking specifically about fixed assets, I will tell you, I believe the fixed assets correction is probably going to take someone 2 to 2.5 years to correct because of the state that it is. And honestly, when Edward left and the staff changes started occurring in 2014 and 2015, it virtually stopped. The previous finance director threw the tags in the garbage, I was told, and said, we're not tracking fixed assets anymore individually, which I don't know how that was even a thought, but.
All right.
Mr. Becker?
Yeah, I mean, it's staffing and systems, right? It always boils down to having enough people to do the work and having a system that augments that work in a efficient manner. You know, we talked about this Monday. Having that fixed assets resource is going to be critical because it's twofold. I mean, first and foremost, it's going to help us be better budgeters during budget workshop time if we have clear control about what our fixed assets are, what our fleet looks like, what our useful life policies are, what those look like at any given time. So that way, when we know if we're budgeting for something that's truly needed at that point in time or not. So that would help us in a budget cycle. So and then you said 2 to 3 years maybe that before you get the house in order. But that person, I think that what Commissioner Bankston's question before was alluding to is, can people on staff help find revenue, support the cost of having a resource on staff? And I think the answer to that question is yes as well. I mean, when we talked about Edmonds and the deficiency of use, one of the things is that it has collections module, right? And so a resource that's on staff that is well-versed and can do that well, then pays for itself in theory because they're going to build a program around it and be more efficient. We're not going to have to pay third parties percent fees for them to go find those dollars for us. So I think having someone on staff to do that work, I think is a good use of our dollars. In terms of the system, and we talked about this on Monday too, we're going to come up to contract with Edmonds. I think a natural cost of retention of a client is making sure that your client is happy on the system that we have. I certainly think that we would benefit from having some sort of professional services engagement, because if we're still talking that we have system gaps or people don't know how to use the system properly 3 or 4 years after we started on it, that's problematic. It just indicates that we don't have a good partnership with our software provider. So I would certainly ask for them to come and just have an opportunity for us to say, hey, this is what we use today. This is what we know that the system can do. How do we do it? How do we get the people on staff to get the education that they need? Do we have enough people to be able to use those modules efficiently, and so on and so forth? So, I get what you're saying. I fully support where you're trying to take it.
A lot of the issue with the system is the way it was set up, and we're piecemealing, trying to correct and change things. Tremaine on the utility billing side is looking heavily at every single process within Edmonds, and we put cases in with Edmonds sometimes daily to correct or run reports to figure out how we can better do some things. So it's not like we're not interacting. I don't want you to think that we're not interacting with Edmonds. We do. I mean, Tremaine has been putting in tons of cases. Shirley's putting in cases. Jessica and IT even puts in cases as we encounter issues. So we do have an active relationship with Edmonds. Again, it's hard to change how it's set up. I'm kind of at the point with Edmonds, we have to make the best lemonade out of the lemons we were given and try to move forward. And we're understanding how Edmonds works in the background was a huge hurdle when it came to project. And I don't understand their logic in some stuff. I've never worked with a software that does their background programming like this. So now that we actually understand it and the finance staff understands if I do this, it causes this, is a testimony in itself.
Yeah, and it's about taking it from a transactional one-off customer support type of model to a true software partnership type of model. We need the latter because we really need to say, hey, this is how we want to use it. Here's what our city's trying to do. How do you support our vision?
So let me give you an example on retainage payable. Edmonds called me and asked me what my solution for retainage payable is that we're doing now. So they're asking us to help them make their stuff better. I was able to identify a process once I understood what was happening after we did the research regarding the finding, to provide a solution to them. And I was able to determine that we should never have any purchase orders in received status, especially to a retainage payable account. If we're going to properly withhold retainage payable within the system and do it through the disbursement process, you have to pay and approve it. Whereas previously, when they made that change in 2017, they were marking the retainage payable as received. So I actually had a formal phone call with the programmers and the leadership team at Edmonds on what my new developed process was that is working through the disbursement process instead of having to manually record journal entries. So again, I think that's a small success because they're looking to us to help make improvements to their system or to help other municipalities. Any additional questions? So the second part of our...
Mayor, I'd like to make a comment if I could. Sure. Having been a finance director here at the city, and like Jamie was saying, I've touched all pieces and all sides of it, and I do see where Jamie's coming from. She's worked really, really hard, and I'm going to put it out there. The records were a lot dirtier than I thought they would be from first glance when I got here. And on top of that, what you have is we implemented a software package that we didn't include the users when we implemented it. We just turned the switch. We came in one day and just turned the switch on, and everybody was like, oh, now what? So, and we're finding that it's not just in finance, but in other areas that weren't even involved in the process. And so we have some challenges with those departments as well. And so, we've had meetings talking about software packages. What can we do to get the best, to use the best use of our resources to get software that will help our employees, from the building department all the way down to public works. So we really have been working through that. The issue that I think you see here, and I want to tell you that as we move through the budget workshops, these are items that we're going to be, these are items you bring through that budget. We've got to this part. What can we do to be more efficient going forward? And I think we have some ideas and things that we can bring to you when we come to those workshops to fill some of these gaps. But I think it's critical that we focus on, it took a while to clean up because we had, and it is what it is, but we had people in some positions that weren't trained. They weren't professionals in those positions. And you can't take somebody and put them into an accounting position that's never done accounting. It just doesn't work. And so I think those are kind of the obstacles. So we had to kind of get cleaned up. And I commend Jamie and her staff. I know they've worked a lot of long hours. It is a lot. But I think we're turning the corner. I think we're getting close to where, we've got to handle where things are. We had to address some of these bigger issues before, we get to we had to kind of prioritize or whatever. So I think we're getting to the point where we need to be. It's been tough, and I want to commend the staff and everything. They've done a wonderful job. Because it's hard to see this sometimes, but there's a lot involved. So I think we have some, when we go through the budget workshops, you'll be able to see some of the areas where we maybe can put some resources to help with these kinds of things. Keeping in mind COVID-19, we didn't think that would hit us, and so we're having to balance all of that. But I wanted that the software was a big problem, and Jamie and her staff have worked really, really hard to get through that, and so I just wanted that to be pointed out.
Okay.
All right, the second part of my presentation is the general fund reserve history presentation. So before you guys have the actual PowerPoint and the actual data sheet that was used to present this. So this is your unassigned general fund balance. I do want to note that from 2004 to 2010, it was noted as undesignated general fund balance. There was a pronouncement change that began and was implemented in 2011 that changed it from undesignated to unassigned. So as you can see here, from 2004 to 2019, you can see the fluctuations in the actual unassigned fund balance. When we mention unassigned fund balance, it's basically the fund balance that's available to be used. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the percentage change year over year of this unassigned fund balancing. You'll see some huge dips and increases, so you have some below the line. So I want to highlight some things. The fund balance in 2004 was significantly higher. It was a percentage, it was 43% of expenditures in 2004, and today it is 25.9%. The decline that you see in 2006 was a result of the land purchase for Highland Manor. The increase in 2007 was a result of debt proceeds for an issuance of debt that we had. So what happens is you issue debt and you get an influx of revenue. In 2008, you see a decline, and that was a result of the purchase for additional property around Highland Manor. In 2012, there was a reimbursement. You see an increase there in 2012 of 40% year over year, and that was a result of the purchase that was done and paid for originally in the general fund for the UCAF incubator property that was reimbursed by the CRA. 2014, there was an increase in expenditures as a result of the refinancing of the Wi-Fi loan, which had an interest rate reduction. The expenditures went up to about $3.5 million because we paid off the debt that we refinanced. 2017, there was an increase in unassigned fund balance, and this was coupled with the increases in the transfers, which will be covered on a later slide, from the enterprise funds, accompanying with, if you recall, last year I mentioned an accounting error for the Golden Gym project. They deposited the dirt proceeds into the general fund, and this accounted for about $800,000 worth of increase in 2017. When I came here last year, I couldn't correct 2017, but the dirt proceeds that was posted in 2018 got reclassified to the utility fund where it was supposed to be deposited. So as you can see, those are some of the accounting deficiencies or errors that we were able to uncover. So again, in 2017, that was about $800,000. The increase in 2019 of unassigned fund balance was what Joel covered in his presentation today, where we had the difference between budget variance and actuals for revenues was about $2.5 million, and expenditures were underspent about $3 million for a net change of about $5.6 million. This is truly a result of operational efficiencies. And please note also, we did not issue any debt that would inflate our revenue numbers with proceeds. So this was a huge success, I believe, on part of the finance staff and the leadership team and the departments working collaboratively to build these operational efficiencies. I'll cover some debt towards the end of the presentation, but please keep that in mind that all these things impact your unassigned fund balance. Here is, I kind of highlighted on the total expenditures slide. In 2006, that major land purchase was $11.6 million. So that was significant. That's why you see the increases in 2006. And then you see an uptick in 2017 that's a little bit higher over the other years. And that's a result of, we started the Fire Station 5 in 2016, the new build for Fire Station 5, and it wasn't completed until it was a multi-year project. But in 2017, we brought on 15 new firefighter positions that impacted our expenditures significantly in 2017. So as you can see on the next slide, our unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. I just want to highlight some other things here. In fiscal year 2, that you see at the beginning of, in fiscal year 2004 and 2005, it was approximately around 43%. And then as you can see, it declines significantly in 2006, and that's when we had that major land purchase. But also in 2014, you see a dip too, and that is when we did the refinancing of the Motorola Wi-Fi debt that I previously mentioned. And then as you can see, the impact related to expenditures, again, the fire station, and then the bringing on the firefighters in 2017. And I think this is the most important slide that we have here. This is the transfers from the enterprise funds. Traditionally, you can see it was kind of a moderate to a slight increase. On the next slide, you'll see the percentage increase. You see the huge increase in 2016, and then you see another increase in 2018. So I wanted to go, Commissioner Becker, you frequently ask, well, can we take money from the utility funds to help cover the cost in the general fund? These transfers are traditionally created for the administrative or the indirect cost allocation for the services that the general fund provides to other funds, which are our next largest funds are our utility funds. So for example, the administrative, the finance, the HR, the IT services that we provide, the transfers from these enterprise funds should cover those services. And as you can see on the next slide, on average, they increased roughly about 6% each year. And that was because it was supposed to account for the increases in salaries associated with the people that are providing those services. You do see in 2007, this was the year that we upgraded and invested in an electronic sanitation system. I believe, Edward, that's the arms for the sanitation trucks. So the sanitation fund actually forfeited its transfer to the general fund that year to cover that cost. So in 2007, you see that it was only 5% and not 6%. And you kind of see that it's kind of standard across the board. Up until 2016, you see a 37% increase. I'm personally unsure as to the reason why this transfer was increased, but it was. 2018, you see it goes back down in 2017, but in 2018, there was another increase of 15%. The 2018 budget was actually created in 2017 during the budget process. That was prior to us arriving here and taking a look at it. There's not been appearingly a true methodology for this indirect cost allocation for these general fund services, and we are currently under contract with Ralph Tellis to help better identify a methodology, because I think it's important that we identify what the true cost of these services are, and we're actually transferring accurate numbers based on a methodology that we can follow each year. So in 2019, we just kept the transfer the same because Edward and I were unsure of why that increase took place. So as you can see and realize, these transfers impact your unassigned fund balance, because if I didn't transfer in these monies, or the city didn't transfer in these monies in these years from 2016 to 2018, your unassigned fund balance would be significantly lower. So this truly impacted the percentage that was reflected on the previous slides. And I also want to note that during the fiscal years 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018, the city issued almost $7.9 million worth of new debt to cover operating expenditures such as vehicles and equipment. I personally wouldn't recommend financing operating items. Those should be things that you should cover in your normal budgets, but we did. And from 2015 to 2019, our general fund debt and all of that debt issuance was, general fund was pledged to cover it. So our current general fund debt outstanding as of 9/30/2019 was $7,600,000, which has a decrease from 2015 of $10,500,000. But as you can see, those debt proceeds, impact your general fund, fund balance, unassigned fund balances as well. And I guess I just truly want to highlight that the increase in general fund unassigned funds balance in 2019, which is a year that I can say accounting is done correctly, expenditures are classified correctly, they're in the right places, revenues are in the right places, was truly due to operational efficiencies. So again, I think that's a huge success for our financial position within the city, and I hope that we can continue going there, though I don't know what the future is going to hold with the impact of COVID-19, and I think, Edward, it's your turn to present. So does anyone have any questions for me?
No, the only question I would have is, can we get what those spikes were tied to transactionally on the enterprise funds? You said you don't have them right now.
I
but can we?
don't know.
So
There's no documentation, there's no methodology for why the finance director decided to increase those
they wouldn't have
transfers.
been tracked in our budget workshops from those years.
We can look back.
can look.
Commissioner, we'll look back and see if there was
Yeah,
anything
because
in those
we've got
documents.
data for all the other stats in here. I just want to.
Right.
I don't want to leave it as we just don't know.
Right, no, we can look back and see if we can
We'll-
find some. We've searched in the GL and everything.
Yeah.
But it may be something on a sheet somewhere that we don't have, but
Okay.
we can look back and
Fair
find
enough.
out.
Susan, could you help us look for some of that information, maybe from the budget workshops in 2016 and 18? So it would have been in the 15 year and the 17 year.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. Thanks for all the team, what they've put, they were a month earlier than last year, so I know things are starting to clean up, so I know that the finance team is getting a handle on it. And the good news is, now that the wastewater treatment plant is completed, we're going to button that up. That should, relieve some pressure on the finance team as well. So I know they're working extremely hard and doing a great job, and, you kind of think you see the light at the end of the tunnel as far as getting numbers where they need to be, and in a way that shows the progress that they're making and that we as a city are making. So, Edward?
And I can't get it. If I did it on that bottom, can I? Can I get it larger right now?
Oh, it's going to go off the screen.
That's all right. Just get me to, all right, so I can just move it. So just make it larger and I'll just move it around. Just move it, there you go. And I'll just move it with this. Thank you. All right, so Jamie has positive news. I get the bad news. I have to give the negative news, I guess. I guess the good thing is, and you should be proud, I think, that you're 19, you have put some money back into reserves, and with COVID-19 out there and who knows what else we might have to deal with, you should feel pretty comfortable. I know I do, and you should feel pretty comfortable knowing you have put some monies back into your reserves as we move through this next budget cycle, because I can tell you by the numbers that you're going to see here and what we're looking at and what staff's going to bring you in the workshops, the expenditures don't usually stop. As you can see with Jamie, they need resources, and things don't, the concrete prices and all that kind of stuff doesn't slow down, but our revenue slows down a lot. So, but that's, I think that's good news. I know it's good to sit in this position today as we talk about budget going forward. One of the things I wanted to show you an update on is, again, is this is the projections again for the month. And as you know, when we were talking about this earlier, last month, we were making projections that we thought it would be about 65%. We thought we would have a 65% reduction. Well, actually, we are, in our sales tax, it's 63. So I didn't have the crystal ball. That was just a shot in the dark, and it was pretty close. I think that's the bottom, kind of, but who knows? With what we're seeing now, with the numbers and everything, maybe we haven't hit bottom yet, or there could be another bottom. But in preparing, as we look through this sales tax, as we go through this process, you can see we're 1.1 million short just in those 2 months in sales tax. And we still have several months to go. Actually, we have 3 months to go. And if you recall, we thought we would project about 50% for the next 2 months, and then we had hoped things would get better, and we'd only have a 25% reduction. So I don't know where these numbers fall. We haven't really changed any of those numbers. But if things hold true to this projection, we could be anywhere from $2.5 million short in this current year, just to complete the current year budget. But we'll monitor these, we'll watch these. We're doing the same with expenditures. We're looking at those. We're trying to make sure that we're only spending the things that are, the essentials, all the public safety things, and trying to do the best we can, because it's important, I think, that we watch this number for this year so that we have that reserves, so that we don't have to get into our reserves in this current year. So those are those numbers. I wanted to, Commissioner Becker, I want to point back out that this variance up here, and for the Publix as well, this variance, you see a 1.3 versus minus a 1.1. The difference between these two calculations is finance annualizes it they just say that it's collected evenly over the year. And I have based mine on what the actual, if you look here in sales tax, these months are usually the best months. The summer months are the best months for us, which kind of shows you that impact of those theme parks, that it's probably going to be even a deeper impact. But either way, that's kind of where the number is. I wasn't far off from 65, so we'll see if next month's is closer to the 50, and we'll continue to follow this and continue to monitor this. It'll be important as we get into budget that we move through these, that we keep an eye on these as well. I will tell you that there's some positive news. As you can see here, our recreation it hasn't changed much. We have a little bit of collection since the last time. We've had a little bit of activity, but there's still a big variance there of about $500,000. But I will tell you there's some positive news down here. These are the amounts that we have filed for reimbursement for some of the COVID. I know it's not $600,000, some of them, but you can see we had the $48,000 that we got from the DOJ, $10,000 that we filed with the Assistant to the Firefighters Grant Program, and then $64,000 recently that we've asked Orange County, that we've applied to Orange County for reimbursement back. So we're working to see if, to make sure that we can get every dollar that we can related to the COVID. And then I also want you to notice here, we were talking about applying for grants for roofs. We recently, and actually, I think it was yesterday maybe, I think that Mayor signed off, and we submitted our grant, and this is a no-match grant. So we got our fingers crossed that, we've applied for $561,000 to the Rebuild Florida Hardening Program for roof repairs. Keep in mind those roof repairs are for like police and fire departments. We can't use them on our administrative buildings, but if we could get a grant like this to help with those, it'll free up some of those dollars that we were going to plan that we could do on our other ones. So we're watching all of this, just so that you know, and I wanted to give you this update so you knew kind of where we are revenue-wise, and we're kind of on the projection of where we were. Keep in mind too, and I said this last time, as we move through the budget workshops that are coming up, our ad valorem currently is estimated at about 1.1, so there is a positive number there. We will see it at the current millage rate. We will see a $1.1 million increase in ad valorem. So keep that in mind, and as soon as we have updated numbers on projections or whatever, we will share those with you as we move forward. But I want you to have all that information I think it's important that you have everything now as we move into the workshops in 2 weeks. Any questions?
Any questions for?
Just to recap how I read this again. So if I'm looking at the projected loss versus actual loss, we've realized 1.1 million so far for May and June, right? And that's about a 33% over what we were projecting. So on that 2.2 number, I would actually probably be more bullish and say, just assume $3 million loss, right? But so if I take that as the number, that's the loss number. And then we still have over on the revenue general funds for Parks and Rec, school resource, all that sort of stuff, another $500,000. So all in, we're projecting about $3.5 million right there. And so then we see favorability in the ad valorem increase, 8.5%, 1.1, the 1.5 that you have indicated here for the open positions that will hold. So we've got about call it 2.6 in terms of favorability. On the Parks and Rec side, the 218 that we've collected, is there any risk there that that's going to be refunded? Is that monies that we will retain for sure?
That's monies that we will retain.
Okay.
We have refunded the 70 that you see are the refunds that we've made. So that money is money we will retain.
Okay, so right now, we're about 900K away.
If you look at it
if
all
you're
in
bullish
yeah.
on the sales tax and then favorability that we have.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith?
I'm good.
Commissioner Banks?
Just very happy that we've made a positive preparation for reserve funds, because we're going to need to look into those this year. But I'm glad that we're doing that, not just simply by balancing it by further debt, but by just good practice. So good job on that. Thank you.
Commissioner Nolan? Anything? Yeah, just one thing, I mean, we didn't bring up the number, but I know that Jamie brought up about the pension liabilities. I don't think she ever brought up the number, but it looks like it's 15 million that we've got to add to the pension liability. 5 million of it is the OTED, the medical benefits for people who retire before 65. So for people who don't know that, anybody who retires, or firefighters or police officers, a lot of them retire at 57. We pay their full medical until they reach 65. So you figure that's $1,000 a month for those 8 years, could be even longer than that. So they've added 5 million to that pension liability, and the pension funds are about a little over 3 million each out of balance. So that's another 10 million there. So it's so we've added 15 million in liability to our pensions here this year, and that's that's based on a stock market coming back. We're basing all of our returns on the pensions at 7.25%. And obviously this year will be a down year, so you've got to have more up years above 7.25 to get back to that is your mean. So we're the nice thing, we got a smoothing, where it's a 4-year rounding number, but if we get we get another bad year at the stock market, it could, that $10 million number could go higher, much higher. So challenge there that's not, we can't solve tomorrow or next year. It's a longer term issue we're going to need to address at some point.
Right. We will be looking at that.
Okay. Anything else, Edward?
Nope, that's all
Good.
I have.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. Public comments. Susan, we got anybody?
Okay, we do. We have 5 online submittals.
Okay. Do we have anybody in the audience that wants to speak? Okay.
I haven't received it. Okay. First one was from Kathy Dickerson. She writes, "Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. Hope all is well. I drove by Martin's Pond yesterday, and I think it would be a great idea to add a walkable gazebo on the pond. A fountain being placed in the Martin's pond and gazebo would make the pond such a view and attraction. That would definitely benefit Highland Manor sales, the new Hilton sales, and help tourists attract future investors and more visitors, and bikers on the trail from 6th Street. Downtown Apopka, just throwing the idea out. Be safe, and thanks for the great work."
Well, good. Well, just to let you know that the fountain is in, maybe they're doing testing on the water
They're
today?
supposed to test a little today, I think, and then tomorrow they're supposed to test the color lights at night. So we should hopefully, for 4th of July, we will have a fountain with color.
And red, white, and blue.
And red, white, and blue, we're hoping.
So that's the goal. So yes, well, thank you for
Okay.
submitting.
All right, next one is from Peter Menga. He writes, "Dear members of our great city of Apopka, I'm asking you to be concerned about the tax-paying citizens of our town. As many and more of us are spending time outside with our family, we need your help to assure that the park's example, Kitland, to stay clean and the West Orange Trail to be cleaned. As you know, we have a homeless problem, and most of them are very nice and respectful people. We have other that do not care, and they leave their trash and human waste. under the bridge and on the bridge are examples that if you walked across the street, you would see, I'm sure, right now. We need help to get this and keep this area clean. We need your help to keep this power washed and sanitized. We help your help to keep our children, teens, and adults safe from these issues. I run the trail every day, and yes, we have a cart that drives up the trail and picks up some of the trash on Saturday, but they do not get out of the golf cart and pick up the trash that keeps piling up. It has not been done since Apopka High School did it almost a year ago. We have a beautiful community, and I love seeing more and more families out there each week, but many of us are disgusted, and we need to help you. We need your help to keep it clean for the safety of our tax-paying citizens.
Okay, well, the West Orange Trail is the Orange County's responsibility. And I would agree, there's some times that we're at the Kent Land, they do a feeding program on occasion and not always kept to what we think are our standards. So obviously, that point well taken.
Okay. Next one is from Bianca Beckwith. She writes, in light of Mayor Nelson's response to a public comment made during the City Council meeting on June 17th, can the public expect full transparency from Chief McKinley and Sheriff Mina on their discussions around forming a citizen police oversight board? Through that means of communication, will this information be made available to the public? Commissioner Bankson also remarked that 7 out of 8 policies demanded by the organizers of the Apopka Black Lives Matter protest are already in place. Where can the public easily access the Apopka Police Department's policies? Furthermore, in response to recent calls for racial equality and due to the economic hardships of COVID-19, will the upcoming budget workshop prioritize funding community support services by diverting funds typically allotted to other departments, including the police?
Okay, we got Chief McKinley's going to come down and respond. I don't think if it's just Chief McKinley and Sheriff Mina, they're not under sunshine laws because they don't serve on a board, I don't think. Do you, Chief? That would be sunshineable?
No.
Okay.
But Sheriff Mina's not here, and I'm not going to speak for Sheriff Mina.
Correct.
Or on his behalf. As mentioned in the letter, the demands that were given to us, 7 of the 8 we do. We do not have a citizens review board at this time. What we are doing is we've gone back through our policies. We've made it clear we haven't trained in quite some time on the vascular neck restraint, so the Apopka police officers should not be using it. We made that clear in our policy that unless it's a deadly force situation, they should not use that. Do want to make it clear that what happened in Minneapolis is not a vascular neck restraint by any stretch of the imagination. That was just a wrong tactical event, wrong tactical maneuver by those officers that led to Mr. Floyd's death. And I've been outspoken that I don't think it, was right what was done up there. In addition to that, we changed some of the language in our use of force policy to make sure that they knew that intervening was important. If they see somebody that's police officers doing something wrong in the Apopka Police Department, they should intervene. We all have situations, and this is what I've explained to my staff and the officers, is we can't communicate with everybody, or we have days that we can't communicate with everybody. If you can't communicate with somebody, instead of letting that escalate, let somebody else step in. We'll let one of the officers step in that might be able to communicate with that individual to de-escalate the situation, instead of that situation continuing to escalate just because you cannot communicate with that individual. The next day, maybe you could have, but for whatever reason that day, they may not be able to communicate with each other. So allow somebody else to step in and do that. In addition to that, as you all know, I'm the president of the Orange Osceola County Police Chiefs Association, and we met last month. I don't remember the date, but what we're doing is we're looking at all the use of force policies in Orange and Osceola County. Most of them are going to be very similar. Some of the language may be a little bit different, but we're looking at the use of force and seeing what we can do to bring those policies into some kind of agreement with each other, with each one of the agencies in Orange and Osceola County, so that we're operating within the same guidelines. The nice thing is most of the agencies in Orange and Osceola County, to include the Apopka Police Department, are accredited We're going through the reaccreditation process right now. We'll actually have assessors on site next week. I think it's the 7th, 8th, and 9th they'll be on site. Actually, I'm sorry, they won't be on site. We're just notified that they will be. It'll be a virtual review of our policies, our practices. But because of the accreditation process, we do meet most of the guidelines that are going on. When President Trump announced his executive order of what he wanted to see, we already do them. So I think it comes down to sometimes it's just a miscommunication between the police department and the community exactly what we do, what the training our police officers go through in the state of Florida versus what they may go through other states, what we do to retrain by FDLE standards, and the mandatory retraining we have to have every 4 years just to keep our certification in the state of Florida as a law enforcement officer. As far as our policies being online, we don't have that technology capability right now. It might be something we can look into. You can always request our policies. They're public record. There's nothing in there to hide or anything else. So,
any questions for Chief?
There is individuals that's interested in serving on the Citizens Police Review Board should you decide to appoint one, and if so, how would that be advertised?
it's a little more complicated than that, unfortunately. You know, and I have read the Orlando Police Department has a Citizens Advisory Committee. The Sheriff's Office has a Citizens Advisory Committee. There's questions whether or not they can have subpoena powers or should have subpoena powers, should not have subpoena powers. And that comes out of the fact that sometimes when you have these advisory committees, and understand that most of them are just advisory committees to make recommendations to the police chief. There's nothing in there that's going to be binding on decisions necessarily. And you have to take into consideration the police officer's Bill of Rights when you set these up. A lot of the advisory committees get frustrated sometimes because the officers don't show up to the committee meeting to give their side of the story. And that may be because it's going through an internal investigation at the same time, it's going through a legal process at the same time, and their attorneys are telling them not to appear and not to speak before these boards. Even if you have subpoena powers, which a lot of people think will now make people come in and speak, you can't make them violate their Fifth Amendment right. So they still, I know when Orange County had their one Citizens Review Board, that became a big issue years ago. The deputies would not show up to the Citizens Review Board and answer questions. Well, that's because their attorneys were telling them not to. The Bill of Rights says they don't have to. There are certain things you have to take into consideration. So, again, under Orlando's, what they do, and I think the Sheriff's Office does the same thing, is the chief appoints an individual, and the commissioners and the mayor appoints an individual to the board. And that's, if we head in that direction, that's probably the direction we would be consistent with. I am waiting to see what goes on. You know, there's a lot of legislation, state legislation, local legislation, federal legislation that's going to come down. So I monitor that every morning when I come in from some of the organizations that I'm a member of, the Police Executive Research Forum, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and the Florida Police Chiefs Association. I read articles from them about the first hour and a half that I'm in just to see where things are trending across the country and in our state to see what we're going to do and what direction we need to head in. You know, my commitment is that we are always going to provide the best law enforcement to this community that we can provide through our policies, our procedures, and our practices.
Good. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
I have one question. I know, because I've been educated a lot when I first started as commissioner by, you know, what police can and cannot do, what, you know, your procedures are, what you guys are trained on. Is there a way that you can maybe do like a little video just kind of giving a snapshot of like, hey, we go to these trainings, this is what's talked over in this training, just that we can put out there so people can have just a little bit of a better understanding? Because like with anything, people, I know even with us, people come up and go, you can do that, and we can't, like legally can't do that, or, you know, that is not in our job, you know, description. I know, like, you know, there's just different things, and then different cities are set up different, you know, too. Is there something that we can, you know, just to just be a little transparent, a little more, just something just to ease the mind that we're one community and we are sticking together? I mean, you guys show it all the time, but just to put that one more step out there that they can constantly review it. Does that make sense?
There's such a gamut of issues. I actually spoke to Mayor Nelson a week ago or so about having some of our community leaders, our faith-based leaders come together and I would just do a PowerPoint presentation that covered, you know, what you have to do to become a police officer or a deputy sheriff in the state of Florida, 770 hours of an academy before you can even become a police officer. Then you have to take a state exam. You have to pass that state exam before you can even go into a field training or be hired by an agency, go into a field training program, which usually is a minimum of 20 weeks of training that you're riding with somebody before you can be out into a car by yourself. A lot of that's not understood. Qualified immunity, which is a big topic right now, is not understood by the majority of our community and what that means. Most people feel like that means that a law enforcement officer cannot be sued individually, and that is not true. So I'm not sure I could cover everything that, you know, we try to as we interact with the community, get people to understand. It comes down to the simple fact of some people don't even understand jurisdiction, where the Apopka Police Department can enforce the laws and where we can't enforce the laws. There was something on Facebook a while ago about the red light at 429 and 441. That's in unincorporated Orange County. But somebody saw an Apopka police officer sitting at that intersection and expected them to stop somebody running a red light. We don't have the jurisdiction to stop somebody at that intersection because they run a red light. It's in unincorporated Orange County. We don't have legal authority there. So there's so many things.
Could we do like an, you know, maybe just some of the stuff that's been brought up, like an FAQ, you know, something like that, you know, just something, I mean, it doesn't have to be really extensive, something just a little broad, or where they can find that information, you know, learn how you can become a police officer. Here's a link to the state, you know, that already has that step-by-step process. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just something like that. I know that's a lot of work right now on top of everything else you're doing, but I would just love to ease the public. I mean, you guys do, like I said, you guys already do a lot. I mean, one of my favorite things I love to brag about is that my police officers are in the community, so is my fire department. You guys do, you know, the book readings at the library and the cookies and, you know, milk. You guys were at McDonald's at least once a month, you know, speaking to the public. And you guys, that's just, you know, the tip of the iceberg of all the, you know, different activities. You're at everything, you know, with a stand so people can come and talk to you guys. And I cannot appreciate that enough, you know what I mean? But just to take it that step further, that, you know, here's some information. Here's some frequently misunderstood information maybe. Here's where you can find that information, even if we're not creating it, stuff that's already been created that we know is reliable.
Yeah, and, you know, I don't think I finished, but unfortunately when I spoke to Mayor Nelson a week ago to try to set up a meeting with the faith-based leaders, some of our community leaders, we've had the uptick in COVID the last couple of weeks, so I'm probably not going to hold that meeting anytime soon.
I understand.
To bring a bunch of people into a room to discuss some of these matters. But yeah, we can try to do a better job explaining things to the community. Right now there is a lot going on between, you know, what's going on nationally, the COVID issues and other things, but we'll make an attempt.
I really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief, appreciate it.
Okay. We have another one from Alicia Mansfield. She said, I would like to know how many City of Apopka employees have been diagnosed with COVID-19. I would also like to know why the mayor does not always wear his mask in public and around other employees. I think the mayor probably should try to lead by example. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Sorry.
As to the report, I was going to put that in my report, my mayor's report, but since she brought it up, we have now 10 positive cases in the fire department, and I think every one of them is from Station 1, and it can all be attributed to an event they had downtown Orlando that, you know, they all got together. So it's, yeah, we're, you know, really have to be careful how we socialize. Police have 2 positives, and Park and Rec out at Northwest have 2 positives. As to my face mask, I think, as everybody, all the employees would tell you, I don't get within 6 feet of anybody, so I don't wear a mask. I do out in public, which is, you know, I'm required to wear a mask. When I go to Publix or when I go to a restaurant, I wear the mask into the establishment. And so I think I'm doing my part, and I think everybody, you know, the city employees would tell you that I'm pretty adamant about, you know, social distancing and what we need to do, and I think the employees as overall are doing a really good job. And but there was a week or two that I was probably less fanatical about wearing my mask out in public, but now we're back into crunch time, so you'll see me with a mask more often than not. So, thank you.
Okay. We have one more from Kevin Rose. He says, "Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a manual therapist by trade and have studied anatomy and physiology for 25 years. While I'm not a physician, I can read and understand how the mechanism of the human body performs. I've watched intently the progression of the COVID-19 virus since early March from the perspective of a scientist, using well-known and validated data statistics site, www.worldometers.info. I have watched the progression of numbers worldwide and locally. 99% of the current global infections are exhibiting mild to no symptoms. In Orange County, with a population of 1.4 million, we've experienced 56 deaths, which is 0.004% of the population, and an infection count of 8,837, which is 0.6 of the population. These numbers are the total count since the 1st of March. If people feel safer wearing masks and social distancing, so be it. Everyone should have the freedom to do so as they please. But I believe not providing all the numbers in case of severity is a crime. In my opinion, not providing the whole picture for people to see is just as heinous as screaming fire in a crowded theater, which is also a crime. Perhaps the city of Apopka could be a shining example in this situation. Perhaps we would begin educating our citizens about all the facts of the virus, which cannot be stopped. It's a virus. Perhaps we could educate our citizens about the immune system, how it works, and what can be done to enhance its productivity. Perhaps we could quell the fear so that their immune systems aren't weakened even more. A very dangerous precedent has been set with the reaction to the virus. We are systematically devaluing the ability of our inherent capabilities to ward off disease while becoming reliant on an outside source for answers. Soap and water kills this virus. Washing your hands, keeping them away from your face, and covering your face when you sneeze and cough are the only things that will stop the spread. I implore you, as a citizen of Apopka and the human race, let's work together to educate and empower our citizens. The approach will be novel, just like a virus, but in the long run, knowledge will always prevail. We are not being given all the information by the experts, and it continues this way, but we will be subject to more control through fear and intimidation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. With that, let's see, we are ready to consent agenda. Anybody need to pull any of the items off the consent agenda? If not, look for a motion to approve the consent
So
agenda.
moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Bankson, second by Commissioner Nolan. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, final development plan amendment, Lakeside Phase 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Bobby Howell, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department. The property is located south of Marshall Lake Road and Marshall Lake and west of State Road 451. Surrounding properties consist primarily of single-family residential and agricultural uses. The applicant is seeking an amendment to the approved final development plan and plat for the Lakeside Phase 1 subdivision to allow for the construction of 8 retaining walls in the subdivision for the developer who wants to provide flatter rear yards than currently exist on the site. There are 177 units in Phase 1. The graphic on the screen shows the affected lots in the pink color. The Development Review Committee and the Planning Commission recommend approval. Staff recommends approval. We'd be happy to answer questions. The applicant is here as well.
Okay.
First concern that I would have is, will this inhibit the runoff to resurface the lake in that sense? Is it simply diverted and it still will end up where it needs to go?
This has been reviewed by the city engineer, and he had no concerns with it, and the applicant, as a professional engineer, could answer those questions as well.
Okay, because that's something that becomes the argument that I hear quite often. So,
sure.
You know, again, that being concerned.
I just want to clarify, the city engineer did have concerns, but his concerns were addressed. He closely looked at it related to that concern.
Great.
Any other questions for Bobby?
Will the impact of doing these walls impact any heritage trees that are on the property with any removal be impacted by that? Okay.
No.
I did have just one other question too, as well as this. We've seen over the last years, different times where as maybe in addition to a home, a pool, or this or that, I know we have setbacks to mitigate that, but it ends up creating a residual overflow issue to a neighbor's yard. Has that been thoroughly thought through in this case? And I'm assuming that the staff will say, of course.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure, because we've dealt with the individuals where decisions were made years before, and there's basically nothing they can do, and so they're now stuck. So we just want to make sure that we're protecting future landowners for any of those decisions. So has that been thoroughly looked at from that aspect as well?
It was looked through at that aspect as well, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Is the applicant here? Want to speak?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Luke Klassen, Appian Engineering, 222 Lee Road, Winter Park, Florida, 32789. To answer your question, yes, we did add some additional storm drains and address all the city engineers' questions. No trees were removed, no additional trees beyond Lakeside. And Lakeside, as you know, is already built and constructed. It was just a different home builder bought the old home builder, and they had different requests as far as their pad dimensions that they want, and so some changes had to be made with the grading. So the site was constructed and built, and now that Taylor Morrison bought out AV Homes, they have different requests for their pad sizes or their home sizes, and so we had to do some changes to the grading, which required some additional retaining walls. But we addressed the grading and the additional stormwater, and no additional trees were taken care of.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Look for a motion to approve the final development of Lakeside Phase 1.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Nolan.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Becker. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, Kelly Park Publix.
Finally. Good afternoon, Bobby Howell, once again, Senior Planner. Final development plan proposes the development of a 72,797 square foot commercial development, including a 52,847 square foot Publix grocery store, subject to the requirements of the Kelly Park Interchange Form-Based Code. The property is located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Kelly Park Road and Plymouth Sorrento Road, as you can see it on the map on the screen. A master plan, preliminary development plan, was approved by the City Council back in 2018. Most of the elements of this plan are consistent with that approved master plan, preliminary development plan. Access to the site is proposed via a full access point and a right-in, right-out located on Kelly Park Road, and a right-in, right-out and a full access point located on Plymouth Sorrento Road. Consistent with the approved master plan, the final development plan proposes dividing the property into 3 blocks, blocks A, B, and C. Block A will consist of retail building, which will be constructed at a later date, and the parking to serve commercial uses, and a 0.9 acre out parcel labeled as future development. Block B will consist of the Publix supermarket, 2 retail buildings ranging in size from 3,000 to 3,750 square feet. An additional retail building to be constructed at a later date, and parking to serve the commercial needs. Block C is 7.33 acres and is reserved for future development. A temporary stormwater retention pond serving blocks A and B will be located on block C. Consistent with the approved master plan to preliminary development plan, the final development plan details the dedication of a 100-foot right-of-way going north-south, which will facilitate the development of internal north-south right-of-way to Appy Lane. So that is here on the plan. So it'll eventually connect down to Appy Lane to the south, which is about a mile south of this location. And that facilitates the internal roadway network within the Kelly Park Form-Based Code area. Consistent with the approved master plan, preliminary development plan, a landscape gateway with an entry feature will be provided at the main entrance to the development on Kelly Park Road. That is located right here. The architectural elevations are consistent with those that are found in the form-based code area. The applicant has indicated that this Publix supermarket is a new prototype that the company is developing, and this will be the first of its kind in this area. And these are the architectural elevations for the surrounding commercial buildings. Development Review Committee recommends approval, and staff recommends approval. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. The applicant is here as well.
Any questions for Bobby?
Yeah, I'll kind of answer my own question, but then if there's feedback, let me just kind of give me some insights here. So, with me, it should come as no surprise when I talk about right-hand turn lanes, right? And I know that this was developed on the 1993 Land Development Code, so the requirement for a certain speed requiring right-hand turns into properties isn't at play here. I just didn't know what the thought process was in not including them on Kelly Park Road into this property.
Yeah, that was handled through the traffic studies, and it was approved. Transportation planners reviews that, as well as our engineering and engineering consultants, as well as Orange County, is my understanding.
Because I look at this property and it very closely mirrors the same kind of setup up at 44 and 437,
Yes, I know
that
exactly
Publix
where that's at.
location.
Mhm.
And both of their entrances off of 44, which would be akin to Kelly Park Road, has right-hand turn into
Yeah.
that property.
Yeah.
That would be, yeah.
The only difference is 44 is a state road, so
Mhm.
FDOT probably required that.
Is there
It's
long-term
Lake
plans
County.
for Kelly Park Road in terms of expansion, four-lane
I
expansion?
understand the future plans are like a 4-lane expansion. Yes, 4 to 6, 4 to 5.
Yeah, I think 4 in them.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm just excited to see this project because it's a real domino that starts some real development going forward, so good to see it.
All right, applicant here? Phew, wow. Jeff?
Sorry for the long stroll there. Jeff Summit with Summit Engineering, 3667 Simonton, Lake Mary, Florida. I don't have a presentation. Hopefully you all are as excited about this project as I am to finally get this one out of the ground. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, let's go.
I got one question, and I don't know that you can answer, but any idea what the cannibalism rate will be for the Publix at Welch and Rock Springs Road?
No, I do not know off the top of my
I
head.
don't know if anybody, it'd be interesting, I think it will help some of our traffic congestion at Welch and Rock Springs Road by having this new Publix there, but, so I don't know if anybody knew that, but just a question I'd love to know, if, I'm sure Publix has looked at it, because they've got.
They're a little finicky, yes, they are, so.
So, okay, all right. Any other questions for Jeff?
One question I had is there any, do you have any knowledge of the type of businesses that would be looking at on those outlets?
I think they're actively doing the marketing on what's going to go into the retails, but at this time, they don't have any, they've signed up any tenants as of yet.
So lines in the water, but no
Yeah,
fish on
they're,
the hook.
the goal is to get the building out of the ground, and then it all kind of falls after that.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and look for a motion to approve the final development plan for the Kelly Park Publix.
So moved. So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Bankston, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, Coral Hills Road self-storage.
Applicants requesting approval of a major development plan for a self-storage facility located at 2200 Coral Hills Road. Vicinity map shows the location of the property. 414 is to the south, and Clarkona Road is to the north and the east of the property. The site is accessed via a full access point located on Coral Hills Road. That access point is located right about here. So this is Clarkona Road, this is where Coral Hills Road, and it ends right down at the 414. Phase 1 of the development will consist of 2 buildings totaling 52,875 square feet that are labeled as buildings A and B. Building A is 38,500 square feet, and it'll be a hybrid climate-controlled self-storage building. Building B is a 14,375 square foot non-climate controlled self-storage building. An outdoor boat RV parking area will be provided within the center of the site on Phase 1. Upon the commencement of Phase 2, the outdoor boat RV parking area will be converted to climate-controlled self-storage in 3 separate buildings totaling 81,950 square feet. Additionally, a 24-unit canopy-covered RV parking area will be constructed on the southern portion of the site concurrent with Phase 2. As a condition of approval, only operable vehicles may be permitted to be stored in the RV area. The vehicles shall not be inhabited. Stormwater retention is located on the northern portion of the site, which is this. The site, this plan shows a site oriented from north to south, 414 down here, retention pond up here, and then Clarkona Road over that way. Public Services had agreed to the provision of an agreement which allows the applicant to construct a wastewater treatment system on the property prior to the city installing a wastewater collection system in the vicinity of the property. Architectural elevations are consistent with those found in the Development Design Guidelines and the Land Development Code. The Development Review Committee recommends approval, the Planning Commission recommends approval, and city staff recommends approval of both the major development plan and the wastewater, reclaimed water and wastewater system development agreement. If you have any questions, staff is here to answer them, as well as the applicant.
Questions for Bobby? Okay, all right. The applicant like to come forward, are you good? Good, okay. All right, anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? Okay, we'll close the public hearing, look for a motion to approve the major development plan and reclaim water and wastewater system development agreement for Coral Hills Road self-storage.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Smith,
Second.
second by Commissioner Nolan. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously. Next up, I guess, Edward, you're doing the,
Yes, I'll give kind of an overview, and then the engineer is here as well. Vlad is here, and Glenn is here from Public Works if you have some further questions, but I'll give the introduction. So we had a routine inspection. Public Services employee discovered what they thought was a sinkhole out on Vic Road. After we went through the investigation, found out that that there was more to it than that. It was not a sinkhole. Staff did some excavation of the area and found out that there was an 18-inch ductile iron pipe that was deteriorating, or had deteriorated due to age. This line was put in 1997, and the H2S gases in the line had deteriorated that line. So we made there was no spillage or anything. The staff made an emergency repair of approximately 60 linear feet of the pipe, so there would be no interruption. But where that leaves us today is it's an emergency replacement that we need to make. We need to go ahead and make that change or make that correction or make that fix to prevent any major or future issues. So this is an emergency repair. As you know, we don't have time to bid this because it is something that we need to take care of right away. So we reached out to YCOM, who recently, if you recall, won the bid for the West Poncan Road construction and actually won the bid against 16 other vendors. So we reached out to them and to see if they could give us an estimate to make this repair. And this repair, it's an expensive repair, but this repair is about a little more than $332,000 to replace that pipe from Poncan, the whole section from Poncan all the way up Vic Road, and I think it ends near Leicester, right near Leicester. So it's that whole section of pipe that has to be replaced, and it'll be replaced with PVC so that we don't have this kind of an issue in the future. This is worst case scenario. So, you know, as they get in there and they start working, we think this is the worst case scenario. So that's why we're asking for this plus a 10% contingency to make this repair to this line. So staff is requesting authorization to proceed with YCOM's proposal, plus an authorization with a 10% contingency to make this fix or this correction. And so staff's here, the engineer's here, staff's here to answer any questions that you may have as well.
any questions for Edward or staff?
Yeah, that's 22 years, basically, so this is the 23rd year, and it's failed. We found it out as an emergency. So is that typical for that, or did it just have specifically to do with the gases, and what is the life expectancy of the PVC?
I'm going to let the engineer explain that to you, so, or give you that information.
Good afternoon. Vladimir Simonovsky, Public Services Department. The lifespan of ductile iron pipe, cast iron pipe is typically 30 years maximum on a wastewater application. With water application, it can run to 50 years. So that's pretty usual. And the case with this one is it's 18-inch pipe. It doesn't have a full flow, so there's more buildup of H2S, which leads to oxidation and creates also sulfuric acid, which hits the crown of the pipe.
And did you say that the PVC is last 50 Or did
No,
you say that
no,
the
Dr.
current-
the current typically goes 30 to 50? So it
Yes.
got cut in
Yeah,
half?
with wastewater application, it's typically 30-year lifespan. With a water application, potable water application, it's about 50 years.
Which is why we didn't catch it before it became an emergency, because it shouldn't have happened that soon?
No, it's 30 years,
Yeah.
almost 30 years now.
You know, was there a design flaw into why the gases ate at that
No,
particular?
no, that's just typical.
And do we have anything else like that that we need to now retroactively go and check?
Well,
Knowing that this one happened.
Yeah, this one particular is 4,300 linear feet. It goes from Ponkian Road down to Leicester Road, to West Leicester Road. Right now, we're gonna attempt to replace the first 2,000 feet, and then there's additional 2,300 feet going south, from the lift station going south. So, I pulled quickly some information, just for your information here. We have total about 0.76 miles of a gravity ductile iron application throughout the city, which is about 1% of all the gravity lines. And we have about 6.25 miles of ductile iron pipe in the force main application, the pressurized pipe, which is 103 miles total. That's about 6% of the force main application. So overall, it's about 4.1% of the total wastewater system, which is pretty good. And there was a usual application back in the days. Now we try to avoid that completely, so any new application, any new pipeline that we put in, we try to avoid as much as possible.
And the PVC life expectancy, is that greater? Is
PVC,
it-
it's about 50 years.
About 50?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Susie, be sure to get those numbers in the report. Okay. Any other questions for Vlad? Thank you. Okay. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? Okay, we'll close the public hearing, look for a motion to approve the emergency removal of ductile iron and the installation of force main pipe on Vic Road.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Nolan.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Becker. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, now on to ordinance number 2769. Susan?
Okay. An ordinance number 2769, an ordinance of the City of Apopka, Florida, changing the zoning from transitional T to city mixed-use Kelly Park interchange, MUKPI, and assigning a neighborhood overlay district for certain real property located at 3845 and 4011 Golden Gem Road, comprising 91.94 acres, more or less, and owned by Quintero Holdings, LLC, providing for directions to the Community Development Director, severability, conflicts, and an effective date.
Okay, Bobby?
No changes here.
No changes. All right. No. Okay. All right. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Look for a motion to approve, adopt ordinance number 2769. Got a motion by Commissioner Smith.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Banks, and all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, ordinance number 2771.
Okay, ordinance number 2771, an ordinance of the City of Apopka, Florida, amending the future land use element of the Apopka Comprehensive Plan of the City of Apopka, changing the future land use designation from county rural to city industrial for certain real property located north of East Keene Road and west of Clarcona Road, comprising 4.94 acres, more or less, and owned by AED Dewar Nursery, 2019 Trust, providing for severability and for an effective date.
Phil?
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Commissioners. Phil Martinez, Planner 2 with the City's Planning Division. The applicant is proposing a small-scale future land use amendment from county rural to city industrial for approximately 4.94 acres. The subject property is highlighted in purple, and located north of East Keene Road and west of Clarcona Road. To the north is the Class Act Farm, which is an equestrian center, and the State Route 414. To the east are vacant properties and the Penny Lane Shopping Center, as well as Clarcona Road. To the south are single-family homes and the Clarcona Resort. To the west is a nursery, a remote control airfield, and the former Keene Road landfill. The property is zoned transitional district, and an application for light industrial zoning has been submitted and will be presented at the next agenda item. The subject area is approximately 4.94 acres, and industrially zoned or industrially oriented properties are in the vicinity. The Development Review Committee recommends approval of the small-scale future land use amendment from county rural to city industrial. And on June 9th, 2020, the Planning Commission found the proposed future land use amendment consistent with a comprehensive plan and compatible with the character of the surrounding area, and recommended approval of the change of future land use designation from county rural to city industrial, subject to the findings of the staff report. And the recommended motion for this afternoon is to accept the first reading of ordinance number 2771 and hold it over for second reading and adoption on July 15th, 2020. This concludes my presentation, and the applicant and I are available for questions.
Any questions for Phil? Okay. Tara, you got anything to add?
Y'all have been so patient. I will not put you through my entire PowerPoint that basically just repeats what the staff report said, but I'm Tara Tedrow from Lowndes Law, 215 North Eola Drive, Orlando, Florida. Happy to answer any questions you have. This is really just a cleanup item necessitated by a 2013 annexation agreement where we were supposed to have a future land use designation and a zoning assigned, and it hasn't happened since then, and staff brought that to our attention recently. So at their suggestion, we are coming forth and we'll bring the adjacent property before you within a couple of months, I'm sure, as well, for the same exact request. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them. If anyone from the public has questions, I'd appreciate the opportunity to come back up.
Sure. Any questions for Tara? Okay. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and look for a motion to approve ordinance number 2771 at first reading and hold over for a second reading.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Nolan. Second by Commissioner Becker. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, ordinance number 2772.
Okay, ordinance number 2772. An ordinance of the City of Apopka, Florida, changing the zoning from T Transitional District to IL Light Industrial District for certain real property located north of East Keene Road and west of Clarkona Road, comprising 4.94 acres, more or less, and owned by AED Dewar Nursery 2019 Trust, providing for severability and for an effective date.
All right, Phil?
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Commissioners. Phil Martinez, Planner 2 with the City's Planning Division. The applicant is proposing a rezoning from transitional district to light industrial district for the same property as the previous agenda item. The proposed light industrial zoning is compatible with the previously proposed industrial future land use. The Development Review Committee and Planning Commission recommend approval of the rezoning from transitional district to light industrial district. And the recommended motion for this afternoon is to accept the first reading of ordinance number 2772 and hold it over for second reading and adoption on July 15th, 2020. This concludes my presentation, and the applicant and I are available for questions.
Just for disclosure purpose, so City Council is aware, the intended use by the applicant ultimately is for a medical marijuana grow and processing center, which will fall under the state laws of Florida in terms of the control of that, which the city will have limited to no control of that, but they'll have to follow the state laws. But I want you to know that staff is aware of what the intended use was, and you're not approached later and come to us and say, why didn't you tell us about this, or surprised about it? Thank you.
Okay, any questions for staff?
No, I've got no problem with that. I've been on record for that. So. No, but I'd like to return the courtesy, though. I mean, it's rare that we're an hour and a half into this agenda and we're not to public comment yet. So thank you for everybody that's here for business purposes. It's been a little bit of a long one, but I don't have any issues.
Okay. All right, anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? If not, we'll close the public hearing and look for a motion to approve ordinance number 2772 at first reading and hold over for a second reading.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Nolan.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Becker. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, ordinance number 2773.
Ordinance number 2773, an ordinance of the City of Apopka, Florida, amending the future land use element of the Apopka Comprehensive Plan of the City of Apopka, changing the future land use designation from county rural to city residential high for certain real property generally located west of State Road 429 and north of West Orange Blossom Trail, owned by Collier Benj Land Joint Venture LLC, Williams Family Trust, and Eugene and Willie Williams, comprising 50.2 acres, more or less, providing for severability and providing for an effective date.
All right, Phil?
Phil Martinez, Planner 2 with the City's Planning Division. The applicant is proposing a large-scale future land use amendment from county rural to city high-density residential 15 to allow a maximum of 15 dwelling units per acre for approximately 50.2 acres. Subject properties are highlighted in yellow and located north of West Orange Blossom Trail and west of State Route 429. To the north is the Stanton Ridge Plat and the Plymouth Hills subdivision. To the east is State Route 429, at Plymouth Sorrento Road, and single-family homes. To the south are nurseries, the State Route 429 Connector Road, and the Morrison subdivision. And to the west is the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church and single-family homes. The properties are currently zoned transitional district, and a zoning application will be brought to you at a later date. The subject area is approximately 50.2 acres with county rural future land use, and this large-scale future land use amendment is being processed simultaneously with the next agenda item being the commercial future land use for what is known as the Floridian Town Center. The Development Review Committee and the Planning Commission recommend approval of the large-scale future land use amendment, and the recommended motion for this afternoon is to accept the first reading of ordinance number 2773 and authorize transmittal to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. This concludes my presentation, and the applicant and I are happy to address any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Phil?
The only thing it's more comments for the purposes of the public watching and public record. Just again, reminding the fact that this is going for transmittal. There's still language in here talking about school capacity and those agreements that have to come into play down the line, as well as we've had some residents concerned about some street infrastructure and street safety in that area as well. All these things in due time will come as part of this business, but not what we're approving here today. So.
Okay. All right. The applicant like to come forward?
Hi, my name is Andrew McCown with GAI Consultants. Our offices are located at 618 East South Street in Orlando. And myself and the team and representatives of the owner are all here today to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, any questions? Okay.
Well, let me just ask, I know we're not here today to discuss what you're going to do with the property, but in the future when those things are identified, there are residents in the area that are concerned about what is going to take place, and as Commissioner Becker indicated earlier about some road infrastructure and some improvements in the area. Would they have an opportunity once again to meet with you to talk about their concerns?
Yeah, so we did meet with the community back actually before, this was pre-COVID in December, and we did meet with the surrounding community, and in general, they were actually pretty excited about the possibility of having proximate grocery store and other retail uses, and possibly even a YMCA. That's still in the works, but I don't believe there's another public type engagement planned. But as Phil mentioned, we are coming forward with a PUD submittal, which will include the appropriate buffering, and that is definitely a back and forth with staff and the community to make sure we get the appropriate buffering correct. So there will be that opportunity.
Okay.
I mean, got any questions about Pam's here if you wanted, as far as roadway infrastructure? It just kind of that was just a general question, or was that a specific road they were talking about? Commissioner Smith?
Well, when I was up there, I know there are several dirt roads that's in the community that's right adjacent to the property, and they were concerned about when all this development took place, if there was some plan in place that those improvements could be included as a part of this project to help the community is what they were looking at. They've been going before, I guess, the county previously looking for some assistance, and everybody ignored them, and they feel like that now Apopka is coming in, moving in, but they're still not benefiting.
I think they're still in the county though as well.
Those roads are, yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, I know when I was at the county commission, there was, we identified all the roads in Orange County that were still dirt and it's a long list. I know, because they'd come to me about Warren Sapp, yeah, so I was there and trying to get, $500,000 or $600,000 just to even get a harder base on it was difficult, so, yeah, okay, all right. We good?
Mayor and Commissioners, Phil Martinez, Planner 2 with the City's Planning Division. I just wanted to point out that should the applicant apply for rezoning prior to going to the public hearings for that rezoning process, the applicant will send out letters to property owners within 300 feet. They'll post yard signs, and there will be advertisements in the newspaper.
Yeah, and to Commissioner Smith's point, I mean, it may not, and we know how, legally speaking, what we're obligated to do, but really from a what's the right thing to do, that's what I think we're all concerned about. So really, if you think about this development and what the impact it's going to have is, you would probably go all the way north up to the others because G.E. Smith is that road that I was talking about previously. It's going to be all the natural ways that traffic percolates to the path of least resistance, and I think this is going to impact south to 441, north to the others, west to G.E. Smith, and then all the roads that we've identified thus far. So it's just, when you do these things, just make sure that you try and broadcast it as much as you can in that particular area, just to make sure that people feel like their voices are heard, because it's obviously something like this just doesn't impact 300 feet away, right?
Absolutely,
So,
yes.
Let Pam kind of dig in that just.
What I would tell you is I truly believe that they've already started reaching out to the community. And as you recall, we've adopted a master plan, and it's kind of like the foundation. I know that there is at least one person on Hermit Smith who has already reached out to us. So it's fully their intention. We've done the first level of traffic study. It's for the comprehensive plan amendment. It was based on a bubble plan. So we did it we had them do it mostly because the law requires it, not because it has any value. But when they come in to come in with their site plans, we're making them do a traffic study that looks at everything and anything in addition to the roadway network that they've already committed to build through their project, things that you see. We'll be talking to them about helping us with those fixes. I don't think it's their intention to come in and break every roadway in the area, but we've already identified some trouble spots, and they're willing to partner with us on that.
Good. Thank you, Pam. Appreciate it. Okay, anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? Sure, come on down. Thanks for hanging in there this long. You need your name and address for the record, please, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Austin, and I live at 3401 Dewberry Avenue. And the last time I was here, the question that I was asking about, they were saying the easeway, where it's laying right behind where Shallow Missionary Baptist Church is there. My house is right where they're gonna build everything. I'm the only one sitting right here now. And my question was, I see that they tied off all the trees. That's half of them are on my property, and the other half is my cousin's property, what they already taken away. My question was, I know they made an easeway when Shallow Missionary Baptist Church bought the property. They had an easeway to the back, but that easeway is laying right where my fence lay at. So my question was, no one contacted me. I just want to know what they're gonna do about that.
I think you got the guy, the head cheese is here. I'm sure he'd be happy to get back to you. Obviously, they can't cut trees down on your property, so maybe there's just a miscommunication. But Tony, you want to have somebody on your team reach out?
Sure, and when you're done, if I can address the...
Sure. That's...
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Sure, this is Tony Benj.
Hi there, my name's Tony Benj. I'm one of the principals with the Collier Benj Land JV. The tagging of the trees was actually part of the tree survey that was conducted on property which we would either be purchasing or owning right now. So if there was something tagged outside of the property bounds, I we would be unaware of that. But everything that has been tagged for basically roughly the 90 acres now, were trees over a certain caliper through that, and you see the white. Nothing's been disturbed or done yet, just the simple tagging of those. As far as the property boundaries, we are, the last piece we have to purchase is right now held up because we've got some squatters on some of the property that we need to evict before we close on the final 10 acres. Yes, perfect. Which is this piece right here, which is the Williams Family Trust and the Luveta Williams property. And so the tagging within that was all within the church or the Williams Family Trust property. The easement that's being discussed is between the Shiloh Baptist Church and this property corridor. There's an existing easement for access right here that runs along that. And that's with what we would be looking to either enhance at some point if the traffic studies warrant that. Obviously, as a mixed-use development, one of the things that's critical to make that successful is people need to be able to get in and out of the development in an easy manner. And so we share any concerns as far as traffic is something that every retailer, every other person involved in the process really wants to make sure is done right. So that is something that it's a mutually shared interest we have with you, and we're happy to look at that. And we'll be working on it extensively with Pam and the traffic engineers to ensure that that's done.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
That answer your questions?
No, it still didn't answer the question I'm talking about. And the problem is that I am family to the Williams.
Right.
Not the one that where they're liking to get the
Right.
property. Over the years, when my aunt owned it years ago, then my cousin took it over.
Right.
And now he's passed away and his wife has sold it. I think what the problem is, when they did the surveillance, back in the day, all of us was family, they didn't do the surveillance there. But my point is, I've been there over 60-something years, and that way he's saying about the land where it tags off, they didn't survey it back in the day, and now they survey it. But I've been living right there for about 60 years. So if that's all with the plan that I see, it has got everything that's on that plan. My back door is sitting almost where the YMCA is gonna be sitting. I guess I need to talk to them about it.
Sure, yeah, they
or
get
whatever.
some contact information, yeah, they'd be happy to.
All right.
Yep,
All right,
thank you, ma'am. Okay, awesome. Anybody else wish to speak on this matter? Okay, if not, we'll close the public hearing and look for a motion to approve ordinance number 2775 at first reading and hold it over for a second reading.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Bankston, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Mayor,
Motion carries.
Mayor, that was 73.
Oh, I'm sorry.
73 was the one.
73. Go back. Need a motion to approve ordinance number 2773 at first reading and hold over for a second reading.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Bankston, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Susan?
Okay. Ordinance number 2774, an ordinance of the City of Apopka, Florida, amending the future land use element of the Florida Apopka Comprehensive Plan of the City of Apopka, changing the future land use designation from county rural to city commercial for certain real property generally located west of State Route 429 and north of West Orange Blossom Trail, owned by Collier Benj Land Joint Venture LLC and Williams Family Trust, comprising 23.73 acres, more or less, providing for severability and providing for an effective date.
Okay. Phil?
Phil Martinez, Planner 2 at the City's Planning Division. The applicant is proposing a large-scale future land use amendment from county rural to city commercial for approximately 23.73 acres in an area that is south adjacent of the previous agenda item for residential high future land use in the northern 50 acres. So to the south is the State Route 429 connector road, and as mentioned previously by my colleagues, the State Route 429 connector road is proposed to tie into this development, or into this area. The property is zoned transitional at this time, and a zoning application will be brought to you at a later date. The subject area is approximately 23.72 acres with county rural future land use, and this large-scale future land use amendment is being processed simultaneously with the previous agenda item for high-density residential land use for an area that is referred to as the Floridian Town Center. The Development Review Committee and Planning Commission recommend approval of the large-scale feature land use amendment from county rural to city commercial for approximately 23.73 acres. And the recommended motion for this afternoon is to accept the first reading of ordinance number 2774 and authorize transmittal to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. This concludes my presentation, and the applicant and I are happy to address any questions.
Okay, any questions for Phil? Okay. You'd like to, good, okay. All right, anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? If not, we'll close the public hearing, look for a motion to approve ordinance number 2774 at first reading and hold over for a second reading.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Nolan.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, ordinance number 2775. Susan?
Ordinance number 2775. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Apopka, Florida, amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Apopka by amending Part 3, Land Development Code. Article 2, Section 2.4.7, Scheduling of Public Hearing and Public Notification, by amending Part 3, Article 2, Section 2.5.2, Site Development and Plating, by amending Part 3, Article 2, Section 2.5.4, Permits, by amending Part 3, Article 4, Section 4.2.2, Principal Use Table, by amending Part 3, Article 4, Section 4.2.3, Standards Specific to Principal Uses, by amending Part 3, Article 4, Section 4.3.4, Standards Specific to Accessory Uses and Structures, by amending Part 3, Article 5, Section 5.1.10, Vehicle Stacking Spaces and Lanes, by amending Part 3, Article 5, Section 5.6.2, Applicability, by amending Part 3, Article 5, Section 5.14.3, Utility Excavation, Trenching, and Backfilling, by amending Part 3, Article 5, Section 5.16.5, Traffic Impact Analysis, TIA, by creating Part 3, Article 5, Section 5.17, General Development Design and Improvement Provisions, by amending Part 3, Article 6, Section 6.7.2, Design Base, by amending Part 3, Article 6, Section 6.7.4, Slopes, by amending Part 3, Article 7, Section 7.1.5, Level of Service Standards, by amending Part 3, Article 8, Section 8.5, Non-Conforming Signs, by amending Part 3, Article 10, Section 10.2.4, Exceptions and Variations, by amending Part 3, Appendix A, Mixed Use Kelly Park Interchange, MUKPI, Form-Based Code, Paragraph E, Review Process, providing for codification, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and setting an effective date.
Real quick, Susan, I missed the first part of that. Can you repeat that again?
You can stay afterwards.
Thank you. Jim Hay, Community Development Director. Got to apologize for the long ones, but these are also long amendments for the Land Development Code. This is the obviously the second set of glitch amendments. We call them glitch amendments just because they're filling in the blank or clarifying certain items from the Land Development Code. This was presented to the Planning Commission originally, the first set for the Land Development Code back in December 2018, and then we passed the new Land Development Code in March of 2019. This request is like I mentioned, it's the second set. This affects 7 of the 10 articles and Appendix A, which is the Kelly Park Interchange Form-Based Code, and about 14 of those sections within those articles themselves. Because of the length of each of these sections, I did provide a cheat list, I guess you could say, of a couple pages that very briefly shows where they are and again, briefly what they are. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and just go through those as brief as I can. Planning Commission, I think I shortened it up quite a bit from the first set of glitch amendments that we had. And again, if you need a clarification, just let me know and I'll stop and clarify anything that you may have questions about. A lot of these do come from staff, and some of them also come from the public that are actually reading our land development code and not going to sleep at night. So the public hearing schedule right now, the Planning Commission, of course, met June 9th. City Council first reading is tonight, or today, and second reading is scheduled for July 15th. I did update the last page of the ordinance so that it does reflect the correct meeting dates, and also we changed the actual advertising date so that the 26th of June was the last advertisement for these two meetings. That way, we made sure that both of these meetings were advertised before the meetings actually occurred. So that's May 29th and June 26th with the advertisements going in the Apopka Chief. So going through the ordinance itself, one of the big things that was occurring was when we were doing plats. Plats are legal recordation. They're all reviewed by the engineers. It's a legal recordation of properties, and in order to speed the process by a little bit, we never had the option of actually putting this into a consent agenda item. Some of the plats are very simple, others are a little more complicated. We may or may not want to pull that from the consent agenda, but again, it's a legal thing that engineers do. I look at the plat themselves, and sometimes I look at the legal description, and I have to actually correct the engineers for the legal description. So what this does for the public hearing schedule is actually put this as a standard public hearing versus a quasi-judicial, so that it can go on the consent agenda. Again, it speeds it up a little bit faster. For those of you that, past plats, typically you don't even make a comment, so we thought that's an option to go ahead and go with. Excuse me. The next set is under permits, driveway sidewalks, and then driveway sidewalk review standards. We actually, instead of saying fence or wall, it's actually supposed to be driveway or sidewalk for where the setbacks or where those are supposed to occur, so that we actually changed that language so that it reflects what we were actually looking for. The interpretation was there for the setbacks for the driveways, but it didn't actually say it. The principal use table, this actually ties in with one of the next amendments in regards to ALFs. However, we also put in, I've got to find this real quick, bear with me, nursing homes as a special exception for the commercial corridor, commercial district. And we also put in commercial vehicle sales and rentals as a permitted use under industrial low. It was allowed as a permitted use under industrial high and under the commercial regional, but we skipped that middle part, so we added that in there. It didn't make any sense to allow it in regional and commercial regional and commercial high, but not in the low industrial, so we added that in. And then the next major part was the residential uses. This is where we were looking at ALFs, or accessory dwelling units. We've had quite a few different requests. Obviously, as we age in place, there's a lot of families that want their mother or grandmother or in-laws to be able to be on the same property or in the same location, so that it makes it easier for living facilities and keeping an eye on those relatives. Excuse me. So what we've done under the accessory dwelling units portion, we added, instead of just agriculture, we added in the mixed-use district downtown, and that's a maximum of a 500 square foot building, because most of the properties in the downtown area are not that big to begin with. And then we also added in agriculture, the residential country estate, and the residential single family, and these are all 1 acre minimum, so you can actually put a piece of with a 1,000 square foot dwelling unit, so that we can actually get a reasonably sized secondary house for one of these relatives. The only caveat that I did put in there is that that secondary accessory dwelling unit cannot be a mobile home. The next portion that we updated, under dwelling single-family attached, was some of the requirements that we put in for the pool usage, or pool requirements for some of the single-family subdivisions. We got a lot of feedback from some of the developers. The original threshold was 100 units had to supply a pool. Turns out that those pools, along with the bathhouses and some of the accessory units that they have to put in, are extremely expensive. And so as a reasonable, what we were looking at was some of the reasonableness in regards to what number of units would work, and staff ended up coming out with 250 or more for single-family homes to supply a pool and bathhouse and the facilities that would go along with that. In addition to that, we also upped the number of units for the other types of accessory units like that would be required as you increase every 50 units, which would be tennis courts, playgrounds or tot lots. Obviously, if they do, they can put any of those in if they want to. We're just making sure that they do put them in. The next set that we did, there's a couple things that just housekeeping in regards to signage has to comply with. It was supposed to be section 5. Yes. Sure.
Reading the paragraph changes as we're going along here, so just want to clarify a comment on the pool, or on the, talking about the threshold for that one. So down in the bottom paragraph of that change, it says subdivisions with 300 or more single-family detached dwelling units may substitute a second pool for 3 required recreation amenities. I was just trying to see where it said that they would have to put in a second pool to begin with.
This is
if
just,
it was 300.
We use the 300 as a because we were already giving them a break on the 100 to the 250. When you get over 300, there should be at least something more than just a pool to be able to utilize, for recreation space. That's where you can put in the tot lot, outdoor fitness stations, a picnic rest area, things like that.
Yeah, I get the spirit of it. We may just want to fine tune it for the second reading because the way that it reads now is if you're 250 or more, you have to have a pool.
Correct.
Right. And if you're 50 or more above that, for every 50 homes above the 250, you have to put in one of those 5 other pieces of recreational aspects to the community, right? And so when you do 250
Correct.
plus 50, you get to your 300. And you're implying, based off how it's written, that they would have had to have installed a second pool. That's not, it reads confusing. It's just something we probably want to adjust.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I get you. I get you. We'll look at that and, like you said, fine tune that.
Yeah. I mean, I get the spirit of what you're doing here. It reads
Okay.
confusing. Okay.
And I have a question, it really kind of fits right there, so might as well ask it now. Would a splash pad type of a setup be able to be proposed in place of a pool?
Yeah. Well, no, not in place of a pool.
Okay.
That's still the main. It's a similar structure, but it's not. It's definitely not a pool.
Because
That might
there's
be
a liability
something-
factor on pools as well as the expense, and I didn't know if that being a water feature that's very popular and has become more popular for neighborhoods, if that would be something we would want to consider, or if that would just be maybe added to the list of other amenities.
We could add that as a list, for the other amenities, I think.
I think it'd be a great addition to the.
Yeah. One of the things with splash pads, and I don't know whether or not we've had that issue, is that because it utilizes a lot more pumps and pressure systems than what a normal pool was, there's a lot more upkeep in the long run. So.
But if you added it, they still have the other ones they could
Sure.
use. Somebody might want to upgrade to a splash pad.
Yep. Yep. Here we go. For the continuing care retirement community, one of the things that we were looking at was nursing homes, ALFs, assisted living facilities, is in the land development code right now, they are not allowed for anything over a 0.25 floor area ratio. So if somebody were to come in this is one instance that came up, was there's some property on the north side of Rock Springs Road, back behind, I think it's a Dollar General on the east side. They wanted to put in a decent building. Only problem is they could not get much more than about 80,000 square feet. lot of these are three-story buildings. They have a memory care facility. They have the regular care facility. And it's a commercial corridor type property. But they could not make it work with the current floor area ratio. And so what we ended up doing, we're recommending that, because it's commercial, and it was even behind, it wasn't even facing, it wasn't even right on Park Ave. So what we were looking at doing was increasing the floor area ratio to 2.0 and allowing it as a special exception in that area. So we still have some control in terms of the development and how it can work. But it makes it a feasible use. We've got a couple other instances of some properties that are in commercial corridor areas that are also looking at doing an ALF. So we wanted to open this up a little bit more and allow some flexibility within our own code. And that comes up with the nursing home facility on the next section. So that basically, again, we're making it a little bit more flexible. The next section was kind of a house cleaning type thing. In our old code and the new code, we were finding out that when people were putting in their pool, now the last code amendments that we went through, we allowed for decks to be able to go within 5 feet, or as long as it's not within a utility easement in the backyard. And it couldn't be much more than a foot above grade so that you aren't looking over your fence looking at your neighbors. So that worked great with a deck. However, when you have a pool, the pool was supposed to be able to go 5 feet from the property line. Well, what we were having occur is that the pool builders were saying, well, if the pool is 5 feet, that means I can go closer to the backyard, to the back property line. Well, no, that's not how it was working. I interpreted it as the deck, not the pool, but it didn't say it clearly. So this is just saying it clearly. You can't have your deck or the pool within 5 feet of the back lot line or without being in the utility easement itself. And then same thing with the next that was 4.3.4 B19A, and then B, it should have said C below instead of B or D. So it's just little things that were caught. The next section has to do with stacking distances. Obviously, fast food probably use stacking distances the most for your car backups. The biggest issue that we were finding is that for restaurant, fast food, drive-in, and drive-through facilities had a stacking distance of 4 cars. That's nothing at lunchtime, dinner time. It backs up into the adjacent driveways or streets. And so what we were doing was upping that to 8, and that's from the order box itself. However, I did put in a caveat that if they can demonstrate that they have at least 8 parkings or 8 spaces for stacking, they could utilize some of the rest of the building, which is, it's very similar to what, oh gosh, what's the new chicken place that just went? Zaxby's. Zaxby's has about 8 to 9 parking spots from their order window. But if it was, say, McDonald's that's over on in front of Home Depot, that one from the order box is about 5 to 6, depending on what size truck you have or what size car you have. But if you utilize some of the spaces going around the rest of the building, there's another 3 or 4 that can actually stack. So as long as they can demonstrate that they have at least 8 stacking, we can look at any of that as an option through the Development Review Committee itself. But the 4 was just too minimal. If we got in a Chick-fil-A, they're going to have 10 in each lane. So. The next portion is streetlight assessments. This is a portion that Edward and the city administrator and staff has been looking at in regards to requiring HOAs to actually pay for the cost of streetlights in their own subdivision. And what this does is allow us to basically do that. There's also another section in our code that our city attorney had found that also has a requirement in regards to being able to allow us to fee the HOAs for the streetlights that they have in their own subdivision versus the city taking over those streetlight costs, which are extremely expensive. The next section is basically is the utility excavation, trenching, and backfilling. This is one that what we found, I believe, is a brand-new section. Yeah, that's coming up. This is, again, a clarification for a language for our actual design standards. It originally read with the Apopka Construction Standards Manual, but the actual name of the manual is Apopka Utilities Design and Construction Standards Manual. So we're clarifying it in case anybody ever wants to argue. We got the right language in there now. Traffic impact analysis. We added in for part of the review bicycle and pedestrian improvements for on-site and off-site provisions. As you know, we're increasing our footprint in regards to bikeways, and this is just making sure that we have that in our code that does require some of the review and coordination with our staff in regards to where those bikeways are and the connection ability for that path, for wherever the paths are. The next section, this is section 5.17. One portion of this, and it was very minimal compared to what we've got now, was in, I believe it was Chapter 4 of the old Code of Ordinances. We took it out of where it had nothing to do with development standards, and working with the city engineer, we've got now we have the general development design improvement standards, inspection information, certificate of acceptance information, responsibility of maintenance period. We didn't have a lot of this stuff in our code. So when we were going out doing our inspections, there was nothing that was actually part of our code that we could say, other than policy, that was in our code book to require. And now we actually do. Richard worked extremely good on this, and we basically are up to speed now, at least with this, in regards to what we require out in the field for our inspection process. So that was a whole new section. The next section is the design base 6.72. There's two different sections that we updated. The inches of rainfall, instead of 11.3, it's supposed to be 11.8. It's little itty-bitty things, but it does make a difference. We also have the maximum slope for excavation depth, as you may notice. We covered everything except right in the middle. So we added in the ratio for the maximum excavation depth as a 4-to-1 side slopes and maximum 4 feet. That was just one of those things that was left out. And again, that 11.8 inches, and it should be for a 100-year 24-hour storm versus a 25-year 96-hour storm. We don't even know where they got that. Non-conforming signs. We were very, very loose. As you may notice, there's a few signs in Apopka where a business has gone out for years, and we had no mechanism to actually remove a non-conforming sign to conform with the rest of our code. And what this does is allow us that flexibility for code enforcement to actually go out and tell them, hey, this sign is dilapidated, it's rusty, you need to remove it. It's more, a lot of times it can be a safety issue, but it's also getting an old property back into conformance so that they basically are governed by the same code that everybody else that's building is. That's all for that portion there. Garages, this is another one. A detached garage. We're basically allowing, this is for the allowable encroachments for required buffer yards. For the garages right now, we added the language setback from rear or interior side property lines a minimum of 5 feet and not within a utility easement. As you know, sometimes people do have detached garages. This allows them to have a garage in the back side of their property. If they wanted to be able to preserve the front look of a property, a lot of the older homes in the downtown area, they right now, under our current code, they can't put, they usually have a driveway on the side of their property, but if they wanted to put in a garage in the back, they could not. So this allows them that flexibility to be able to put a garage in the back. And under utility sheds, this was an interesting one because we had been going by 100 square feet for a utility shed, which allows the planning staff to basically approve a shed. However, the 120 square feet for a shed is where you have to get a building permit. So anything in between there, planning could do, but engineering or the building department would not issue a permit. So this sets up that 120 square foot for a shed. And I know building and planning are very thankful for that portion. Last but not least is the portion regarding the review process, and this is again the standard review procedures for the Land Development Code for our standard review itself for overlay zones. So it's again, this is just basic catch-up. I've already got a couple more for a couple more months that for glitch amendments that we came up with for agricultural property. So.
All right, any questions for Jim?
Thank you for
Yeah,
listening.
all right. Does anybody from public left? No. So with that, look for a motion to approve, let's see, ordinance number 2775 at first reading and hold over for second reading.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Nolan.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Bankson. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And just one question on you, Jim.
Yeah.
The old Circle K site, speaking of these different things.
That's one.
Any way we can follow up on that? There's an old mattress that's been there for months. It looks terrible. and
The
it
mattress
really-
part, I can contact Steve Burke and see about getting that, or Josh down at Public Services to see if they can
And I don't know
get
if
that
there's
removed.
anything about, obviously they removed old gas pumps, and it's just an open, looks terrible.
Yes, that's one of the main ones that we were looking at in terms of replacement. Fact is, with that site, when they do come in, they could actually be grandfathered in, not for the sign, but for the use if they kept one pump. That doesn't pay. So they have come in, and in order to be able to do anything, they have to bring the site up to code, which limits the number of access points, similar to what Racetrack does, where they have one entrance way farther down on Sandpiper, excuse me, and the other one farther up on Park Ave. So it wouldn't have this nice, long, wide open space. Safety-wise, it'll be a lot better, especially crossing the trail.
And while you're there, in reference to these abandoned signs, I know there's still a couple of these, I guess you call them, when they used to have the telephones on the side of the road, and they had these stands.
Oh.
There's some of those still standing. Is there any way we can get rid of those?
If it's within the road right-of-way and it's our road right-of-way, we could probably get it removed. But they don't have the top part anymore, do they?
No, the top part
Just
is-
the.
Yes.
Well, Commissioner, if you give me the
The location?
location.
General
I'll see what
location,
we-
yeah, if
I'll-
you spot
we'll
them,
give
and
forward.
I'll see about
All
getting
right,
those removed.
will do.
Mr. Becker? Good? Good. All right. Okay. Next up, Resolution 2020-11. Edward?
Okay. Resolution 2020-11, a resolution of the Council of the City of Apopka, Florida, authorizing the city administrator to provide public risk management of Florida with notice of the city's intent to withdraw and providing for an effective date.
Being that we are looking at everything in our budgets, this public, or health benefits and property and casualty insurance are a big piece of the budget. So this doesn't mean necessarily that we will no longer be with public risk management, but in order for us to be able to look at other options or whatever, the contract that we have with them says that we have to notice them by resolution of our intent to withdraw. So I think this is a good measure for us to do, to let them know that we're looking around to see if there are any potential areas that we could, could be some savings that will help us balance our budget in other places. So we just want the ability to be able to look at other carriers and other information as we go through this budget process. So that just says to let them know. So it doesn't necessarily mean we're leaving or we're done with them, but it does give us the option to look at other options.
Any questions for Edward?
We still will have some kind of coverage in place until we decided which way we're going, correct?
Absolutely, because we have to let them know. before October 1.
Oh, okay.
And actually, we have to let them know before that, because if we were to change, we have to allow our employees to have open enrollment and to go through that whole process. So yeah, this does not, no, this does not, there will still be coverage. We will not stop coverage. It's just a matter of, we're letting them, putting them on notice to let them know that we want to look around and see what we can, to see if there is any potential savings in this area.
Yeah, I think it's a natural course of due diligence, right? We're just making sure that financially speaking, we have the best deal possible, at the same time realizing what staff has currently and making sure it's as like for like as possible, but, financially sound.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's exactly.
Good. Okay, nobody from public. Need a motion from the
So moved.
board to
Second.
approve Resolution 2020-11. Got a motion by Commissioner Nolan, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously. Next up, council reports. Commissioner Nolan,
I'm good.
good?
Okay, well, it's been a long meeting, so I'm going to keep this short. I got some information. Obviously, we heard even from our public responses from people. People are really on both sides, some close to the middle, some on far opposite ends concerning the response to our COVID-19 issues. And obviously, you've got a report to follow up here. But I just wanted to bring this. I've been trying to find things that are not politically motivated, just sound information for us to be able to make decisions on. And part of my concerns, obviously, even on the national level, CDC, they had to admit that they lied to the public to say, no, you don't need masks, and then you do, and it's gone back and forth. And I understand as they continue to find out more that things can change. But it just caused me to simply not be satisfied simply to hear someone say, well, the experts say. I want to know what's their empirical data behind what they say, because there's so many different things going on. And that being said, this is just for you all to be able to look through. And in fact, you can go back to, this is an article on Reuters that I found is just several different graphs that you can go to yourselves and look over. And so they report everything in the U.S. There's a lot of things we could point out, but again, not for the time. And I don't purport myself to be a medical expert, so, but I do have a rational mind. Obviously, we've seen a great uptick on different things. One of the key things that we can look at here, obviously, on page 4, the reported tests in the U.S., we see that it's kind of flat line positives, even though the increase of the testing has gone there. So it kind of shows us that it's not as volatile as it sounds and seems. I don't want us to be, if we err, we should err on the side of caution. Obviously, we all think, I think we all agree on that. At the same time, we can't just simply do what everyone else does because they do it. I want to make sure that we're really looking at it. That next page there, page 5. If you notice, by the way, at the top, there's a black box, total tests, % positive. If you go to that site, whichever one you select, that's the darkened one. So that's what we're actually looking at there. Again, that's the Florida numbers, and we see an increase, obviously, in this last month that has everyone's concern. But when you balance that with the increase in the testing, it gives a bigger picture. The % positives, again, we see that increased somewhat here, which is why there's a greater concern. But when you see it, I'm trying to just go through quickly. Jumping over to page 8, it really shows that as far as the deaths, and I think the one caller who called in gave the report there, the percentage of that is quite low in perspective to what we typically face when we face different diseases. So keeping that in perspective as we approach this, obviously there, it's stayed relatively flat, even though the testing has increased and the positives have increased, which we ourselves found out in our own city testing that some of those were negative. I guess I have some real questions that I wish we had medical experts that can give us the empirical data behind their expert opinion to prove these things for us so that we're not overreacting in a way that's negative. The big thing comes down to, again, the mask wearing, and the question again, why aren't we seeing more of that? And this, I don't have the information for you. I can get it for you possibly through Ed, but, there's been some testing. I see some data, and then that starts making me feel more convinced about a thing. And I would like to know this from our own medical professionals. When the mask wearing is there, first of all, in our the CDC and the different things that we're presented with right now, one of the things that it said is that this is projected not through, I don't know if it's the right term, the aeration or the aerosol, or I don't know the right term, but basically through the breathing of it, but through the droplets, which is why the mask is important. The challenge is, and the data that I'm seeing talking specifically with medical professionals, is the harm that masks actually do. And I've seen, you know, again, just because it's on the web doesn't make it true. Just because it's a YouTube video doesn't make it correct. But the problem is you have experts that absolutely disagree on these things. So I found a test done by an OSHA monitor that basically the requirement is 19.5% oxygen for a workplace to be safe. They literally took it without the mask. It was 20.6%. Put the mask on, and within 10 seconds, the alarm went off. It registered at 17.4%, which was hazardous, and OSHA would shut down the workplace for that. That's the reading inside the mask. So the concern there is, and the question I would like to pose, and this is, I mean, we're fighting the government and the world at this point. But at what point is it more safe for the wearer? We have lawsuits now beginning to happen for people being forced to wear it over their nose and mouth. So why are we wearing this? Is it for the person to decide whether we're going to help them stay safe for themselves? Well, for the droplets, it's to keep everyone else safe. And that's something that, you know, a consideration of others around us. Again, there are people who are very afraid because of these things. And there are deaths, no doubt about it. But the numbers, when we look at the data, it gives us a bigger picture. So in the medical professionals that I have discussed, and by the way, I'll throw this in, this is in a Journal of Clinical Anesthesia, an article done by Marston University faculty. Quote, this is the article: respirators used by healthcare workers due to COVID-19 outbreak increase, and I'm trying to read my own writing, and tidal carbon dioxide and fractional inspired carbon dioxide pressure. Bottom line is there is an increase in the intake of the carbon dioxide by wearing these. A simple description by a medical professional, and I checked this with some others who verified this. So again, we've got experts disagreeing, but they basically said that this is why when someone's hyperventilating, you have them breathe into a bag, because the CO2 level, if it's increased, will cause the acid level to rise in the blood. The problem is when you're healthy and you're breathing more carbon dioxide than you should, which this other test seems to back up by a metered measure, then it causes that acid level to go too high, which actually hurts the immune system. So these are some real things that I just want to bring this up. We have to make decisions that affect people's lives. Erring on the side of caution, yes, but blindly going when there's data to back it up, those are the things that concern me. So I just want to ask those questions. Give us the data to back up the opinions. And these are just some of the things that I've seen there. Again, if you would like these different references, I can pass them along if anyone would like those as well. Again, this is a challenge. I'm not a medical professional, but there's a point where our own citizens, again, are on both sides of this thing. And I don't want us to set ourselves up for a negative event either way. Biggest issue right now, aside from our health, is how it's affecting us economically. So we want to do things that allow us to stay open for business as well. So finding those compromises, I think that we need to take a good look and be open to those things.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the data. I mean, this is really helpful. And too often, and I think it was Mr. Rose who sent in stuff for public comment talking about the data, because people can use data to support whatever story that they're really wanting to tell. I think a lot of people get lost, and it's misguided to just talk about overall number, right? Because you could say U.S. has a number, and you try to compare that to a different country. Well, you really have to start looking at percentages to really understand how it is spreading, because you know the U.S. obviously has 320 some odd million people versus a country like Australia that has something fractionally less. So then you say, okay, what is that number of cases as a percentage of your population? What does that look like? And I like the view on page 6, because really what that tells you is of all the tests that have been done, what is that positivity rate? You know, if your testing is increasing because people are testing employees as they go back into the workforce or whatever the case might be, it's a straight line, one could hypothesize to say if you're testing more, you're going to have more cases. But if the rate of positivity is increasing as well, that should cause some alarm. It should say, hey, wait a second, things may be getting a little bit worse here. Because on that graphic on 6, you spike up very high to say, of all the tests, you had 100% on 3 or 4 of those verticals. That's probably because when we first started testing, there was a requirement that people had to show symptoms in order to even get tested. So of course, your positivity rate is going to be very high up front. But as things started going down, people that were not showing signs of symptoms that still got tested, your positivity rate shrunk. But now you see it on the right-hand side, it is ticking up a little bit. Now, whether or not that continues that trend, something to do. The real interesting would be to double-click this data, and it kind of goes on what you're about to share, Mayor, on this here is page 7 would then be, okay, you're 100% of all of your positive cases. Now subcategorize how much of those are requiring hospitalization, how much of those are, resulting in death. Because, when all of this first started happening, this whole flatten the curve aspect was to make sure that we didn't do undue stress to our hospital infrastructure, our systems that would treat this disease. But if you have cases that aren't resulting in a material amount of increase in hospitalization requirements, again, it's another piece of data that's helpful for us to consider when we're trying to make policy. So, the more that we can look at this stuff, what Mayor's about to present, I think is going to be better for us because, again, let's look at the data ourselves and come up with our own hypothesis. So.
And that's part of the reason I put number 9 in there. It's New Jersey. Why did I have that page out of all of them? And you read at the bottom, a spike observed in deaths in New Jersey and nationally, so this affected our national numbers, in late June is due to New Jersey including over 1,800 probable deaths from earlier in the year. So all those were simply dumped in at this point in time, which exacerbates the number and the trend. The other thing, obviously, at the front page is you see the large spike in New York, which affects the overall number and the rationale and the projections of this whole thing. And those deaths, we know that proportionally, this attacks our seniors who we need to protect. We need to go where the main dangers are, obviously. And we know what happened up there. They were forced into nursing homes where COVID was there. I'm not going to get in and be political on this. But the bottom line is that does skew our numbers. That's fallen in New York because they found and discovered that and changed it. So had that not practiced there, it would have changed our whole viewpoint for this whole thing and be more in line with actual versus, these numbers being placed a certain way that try and push us a certain direction. So again, I'm not advocating being unsafe, obviously, but I simply want to make sure that we have sound data and from there make our decisions.
All right. Commissioner Smith.
A couple of things. I know as we plan developments and we contact those individuals that live within 300 feet of new development is what we're required to do. But it seems that too often now we're finding individuals that are living beyond the 300 feet that are also being affected, and because they don't receive a notice, that they don't realize what's taking place until it's done, and sometimes it's too late. So I don't know if there's some way we could extend that courtesy of notifying individuals as to when new development is taking place that may impact them, even though they may be beyond the 300 feet. I think would be helpful and maybe be a good courtesy on our behalf.
Why don't we do this, Jim, if you wouldn't mind, let's just find out what the other municipalities are doing, just so we kind of got if you could do that for us, and bring that back to us, that see what everybody else is doing, just kind of give us a.
All right. And then next, a couple of condolences. Mr. Theodore Bridges, whose house we just painted, I guess 3 or 4 months ago, he passed away.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, he did. And then this morning, Mr. James McGraw, whose house you painted when you was a county commissioner, he passed away this morning. And Mr. McGraw was also one of the first African Americans on the Apopka Police Department.
Yeah.
So he passed away this morning. So we just want to give condolences to those families.
Thank you. Commissioner Becker? Good. Okay, just a real quick update on, I'm sorry, Michael, you got anything, attorney's office?
No, there's no new updates.
Okay.
No updates, sir.
All right, Edward, yours, you have everything?
Yeah, I'm
Yours?
good. I
Okay.
moved on.
Okay, couple things, the coronavirus update. Interesting, I don't know why, but DOH now is no longer giving us data at the granular level we're looking for. I don't know why that is, but that's their policy now as of the 25th of June. So I would agree with a lot of what Commissioner Bankson says about the COVID, but the number I kind of worry about is when the rate of positivity goes up. Now, to that point, because it's gone up, we've been in the 3 to 4 to 5% rate, to we're up to like 14%. The rate is just skyrocketing. Now, how you would counter that, I guess, that argument is that, we did the 1 week we did testing at the VFW. They pulled all the testing from that, all the pinprick tests, so we can no longer do that. Nationwide, the FDA pulled the ability for us to do any testing other than the nasal swabs, which if you've ever had it, I haven't had it done, but it's brutal, or the complete blood draw. So basically, it's taken us out of the ability to do testing. It's not something I would want to put us in a financial responsibility for something going wrong. So we're hoping to hear, Chief Wylam thinks that we'll have something maybe by tomorrow that will let us go back and start doing some testing. So all that being said is if you've now got the tests, you reduce the amount of tests, you're going to reduce the people that are going to wait in line for 2 hours or ones that are more likely to have, symptoms then the positivity rate would go up. So I kind of get you, but to me, if you had unlimited number of tests and your positivity rate's going up, that's a problem.
My only question on that is, and this, I think I'm reading this right, it's testing coronavirus, which has many strains, and even when some are tested positive, it's even stated, and I've tried to get this information even to bring today, that yes, this could be 19 or it could be a cold. So those are the kind of things that make people then want to ignore it, and we shouldn't ignore it. There's a real issue going on.
Yeah.
But so positivity, is it positivity for COVID-19 or is it positivity for coronavirus, which is a much bigger window?
Right.
And the testings that they're taking from us, or there are certain tests that are more narrowed and certain that are broader, and they're throwing all of these into these numbers. So that's my contention.
So anyway, the hospital stays are going up. I mean, a number of the percentage of beds that are filling up. So there are more cases in our hospitals. We're not in any kind of danger zone yet, but cases are going up as far as hospital stays. Death rates are declining based on the age of the people that are getting it. But so I think we need to be cautious. I think and so, which brings me back to for the people maybe didn't see the first part of the public comment, just let everybody know that we have 10 positive at Station 1, the fire. So all of the other stations had 0. So it shows you, I think we all kind of would admit that it's that close contact in a bad situation, a bar or a gym. And so we've closed the gym again. We're going to close the VFW until further notice, probably July and August. But because of outside, we're going to leave the Northwest open unless y'all have a concern or not. I think we've got tournaments booked at Northwest, but we feel like the heat, which they say is not, will impact the COVID virus. So we think we're going to have the tournaments. Obviously, we're going to have hand sanitizers, we're going to have masks. Our employees will no longer be cleaning bathrooms or dumping the garbage during tournament hours. They're either going to go in before the tournament starts or after the tournament's over for that evening and do any of the janitorial things that need to be accomplished there. There's some concerns because we obviously have 2 there at Northwest that tested positive. So that's kind of where we're going. We're back to Zoom meetings at the city council level. We're ramping it back up a little bit, and we hope we get over this. And as the numbers continue to decrease, which we had the spike, which was Saturday and Sunday. The last 2 days have come down considerably. So, I don't know where that puts us, but, I think maybe hopefully this will be the last of the spikes and things will come down. We just had, we'll have, I think tomorrow, the next day, we've got 50,000 masks being delivered from the federal government. So they're going to be housed out at the Gillum Center. So if they're in need, small businesses or folks that need, senior citizens that need some masks, we'll have some available for them. I think that's it on the COVID. I'd say we had 2 police officers as well that tested positive. On to Errol Estate, the task force had a pretty good meeting. It was, I always had it on YouTube. And just to kind of give you a quick rundown, it looks like the committee as a whole liked the golf course idea. They wanted a bigger pool, keep the pool bar, a new clubhouse, redo the tennis courts, add some pickleball courts. Fitness center was a maybe. Walking trails, they really liked that idea, and a playground. Business center was a maybe. So we're just now trying to put together numbers so we've got something at least, from a financial perspective, what is it going to take to do all these things? And then, maybe we'll have to figure out what's really important. So good meeting. Next meeting will be on Tuesday, July 7th, 5:30 here. We had every member, all 21 members were here. So a good group, good smattering across the Errol State community. And so one of the things we're looking at is the FERDAP grants, which we have applied for, that we think if they have a recreational district in place, we think they'll be able to qualify for some money for the playgrounds and some of those amenities. So a good group. We got an aggressive time schedule to try to put something together to get to the folks that are the property owners of Errol. So anyway, I think we're moving along, and we'll have something, I think, to bring to the members. And I know there's a lot of chatter about, that's going on without them. Well, the task force is not making any, we're just coming up with ideas, and we'll have at least 2 meetings and a vote amongst everybody, all property owners before this thing, and then the city council. So it's a long way from being finished, but if we want to get, we need to have this thing done probably mid to late fall to get it done, completed by, because we got to have it in 1st of July to be on next year's 2021 tax bill, if that's something they want to do. So we've still got a pretty aggressive timeline to get this thing completed, if that's what the Errol members want to do. So with that, we will call it a day.